Hey guys, tonight we begin with the absolute worst people the Middle Ages ever produced. The outlaws, the murderers, and the walking disasters that somehow survived long enough to make history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's dark, muddy journey together. You're standing somewhere near the Niemen River, on the edge of June 1812, when the world still feels warm and possible. The sun rises in streaks of gold over the mist. Horses shift their weight. Boots stamp. There's a sound that could almost be music, the scraping of bayonets being fixed, the murmured prayers of men who still believe they'll be home by Christmas. A rider gallops past, shouting orders you can't quite hear. The language is half French and half thunder. The army begins to move, slowly but deliberately, like a single creature made of thousands of legs. You're one cell in that body, one drop in that tide. Napoleon's Grand Armée stretches beyond what your tired eyes can measure. Poles, Italians, Prussians, even a few Swiss who joined mostly for the adventure, all united under one man's hunger for destiny. You're part of something enormous, so large that it feels eternal. You adjust your pack, pat your musket, and try not to think about how it's heavier than the last time you lifted it. The river crossing feels like stepping off the edge of the known world. The water shines like melted steel, and someone jokes that it looks deep enough to drown all of Europe's ambition in one go. Everyone laughs, but not loudly. By noon, the columns are snaking across wooden pontoons, drums echoing like heartbeats. You hear someone say, "Russia won't know what hit her." Someone else mutters, "Neither will we." You think that's funny, but it's the nervous kind of funny, the kind that comes before a thunderstorm. Historians still debate whether Napoleon's decision to invade Russia was genius or madness. Some say it was a preemptive strike, meant to force Tsar Alexander back into France's orbit. Others call it hubris, the ultimate overreach. You, of course, don't have the luxury of hindsight. You just keep walking, following the backs of men who follow the backs of other men. The roads are dust and wildflowers, insects and sweat. You pass peasants standing satent by their huts, eyes hard as stones. They don't wave, they don't smile. It's like walking through a painting where everyone has already left. By the second day, the romantic part of war starts peeling off. You notice it first in your boots, how they rub, how the seams bite, the air smells of leather, horse dung, and optimism gone stale. A sergeant cracks a joke about how France's finest soldiers now look like chimney sweeps. You laugh again, but it hurts a little. Night falls without fanfare. Fires blink across the plain, scattered constellations of human warmth. You eat whatever you can find, mostly bread that could break teeth, and something pretending to be soup. A drummer boy sings a song about Paris. It's off-key, but everyone hums along. You look up at the stars and imagine they're candles in some giant cathedral where God himself is trying to read the map of your fate. In the distance, the Emperor's tent glows like a second moon. You've never seen him up close, but you can feel him. His gravity pulls the entire army forward. They say he doesn't sleep much, that he paces through the night like a man negotiating with destiny. When morning comes, you march again. The landscape flattens into endless repetition. Field, forest, village, field again. Time becomes elastic. You could swear you've been walking for weeks, though the calendar insists it's only been days. Then comes the rain. Not gentle rain. Not the kind that smells like earth and new life, but heavy, unrepentant sheets that turn the world to mud. Wagons sink, horses stumble, and men curse in every language Europe has to offer. You lose count of how many times you pull a boot free only to lose the other one. Someone makes a joke about charging Moscow in boats instead of horses. Another adds that at least then the fish would have something to eat besides stale biscuits. You'll laugh, genuinely this time, because laughter feels warmer than your wet clothes. By the time you reach Vilnius, you're half a badbar of the soldier you were. The city should be a triumph, but it feels like a mirage. Supply wagons lag days behind, and the men who stumble in with you look like survivors of some invisible plague. Napoleon arrives soon after, magnificent as ever, his coat immaculate, his eyes bright and cold. He reviews the troops, his face unreadable. Some say he smiles, others swear he doesn't. All you know is that he rides past without slowing, and for a moment you imagine the world bending slightly around him. You spend the next few days reorganizing, resting, pretending the hard part is over. The talk in camp is that Russia will surrender once Napoleon takes a few key cities. They always do, someone says. You nod, pretending to believe it. One night you wake to the sound of distant thunder, or what you think is thunder, but when the wind shifts, it's not thunder at all. It's the Russians, burning their own crops and villages ahead of you. You can smell it, that bitter, smoky tang of something deliberate. By dawn, the sky glows orange. You see black columns of smoke stretching from horizon to horizon. The land itself is retreating. A veteran near you spits and says, "They're feeding the fire instead of us." He's right. You find no grain, no fodder, no shelter, only ashes and the haunting sense that every step deeper into Russia is a step further from home. Still, you march. What else can you do? Orders have come down, and boots move forward. Napoleon believes speed is the key, that he can force a decisive battle before the Russians melt entirely into their own vastness. But there's a strange quiet between orders. You notice it one night, how even the crickets seem to stop chirping, as if the land itself is holding its breath. You lie awake, wrapped in your damp coat, listening to men snore and mutter in their sleep. One dreams loudly of wine, another of a woman named Elise. You close your eyes and imagine Paris, the smell of bread, the hum of the streets, the warmth of lamps reflecting in rain puddles. You can almost taste it, that simple peace of being home. But the morning rips it away. You're back in motion, back on the endless road east, boots scraping, hearts tightening. Somewhere in the distance, a trumpet sounds, sharp and lonely. Historians still debate whether this first phase, the crossing, the march, the burning horizon, was the moment Napoleon's fate was sealed. Some say the real defeat wasn't at Moscow or Berezina, but right here, at the start, when he believed the world would bend again to his will. You, of course, don't know that. You just keep walking. You joke with your comrades, cursing the mud and the endless mosquitoes, laughing when someone suggests opening a spa in Siberia after the war. You even find a patch of wild strawberries by the roadside. Tiny, sour, perfect, and for a moment, you forget everything. Then the wind shifts again, carrying that faint, ominous chill. It's still summer, but there's something colder beneath it, something you can't name yet. You look east, toward the dark forests, and wonder how far a man can march before his shadow gives up and stays behind. The army trudges onward. The drums fade, the silence grows, and somewhere far ahead, Moscow waits, silent, burning, and patient. You wake to the sound of hooves on wet ground. The morning smells of smoke again, but this time it's closer. The sky has that grey-yellow tinge that looks like it's still deciding whether to rain or burn. You blink against the fog, rub your eyes, and realise it's not fog at all. It's the residue of a city that's been set on fire ahead of you. Smolensk. The name passes down the line like a prayer, or maybe a curse. You've been hearing it for days, this promise of a decisive engagement. The officers whisper that the Russians will stand there. Well, the Emperor wants them to. You want them to, too, because you're tired of marching through ashes and silence. You want a reason, something solid, something to point your musket at and say, "This is why I'm here." But as you approach, it becomes clear that Smolensk isn't waiting for you. It's burning for you. The road narrows between scorched villages. The fields are blackened stubble. Crows circle overhead like gossiping old ladies at a market. The few civilians you see are ghosts in dream or rags, watching from the tree line, expressionless. When one of your men offers a coin, an old woman spits on it and walks away. You can't tell if it's hatred or pity. Historians still debate whether the Russians' scorched earth tactic was planned from the start or born out of desperation. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're starving, your boots are rotting, and the smell of burnt wheat follows you like a curse. You remember the first loaf of bread you tore apart back in Vilnius? Soft, yeasty, warm. Now, when you find a scrap of rye that's half charred and half dust, you chew it like it's gold. At night, the fires of Smolensk are visible from miles away. It looks like the sky itself has been flipped upside down. Burning from the inside, you can feel the heat on your face long before you reach the outskirts. And then you hear it. The cannon, Distant at first, like thunder over a far ocean, then closer, rolling, rhythmic, alive. You're not the praying kind, but your hand finds the small wooden cross your mother gave you, and you whisper something that might count as faith. By dawn, the city looms ahead, a skeleton of walls, towers, and smoke. The French artillery answers, the ground shaking beneath your feet. You can see the Emperor's silhouette on a ridge, coat fluttering like a flag. They say he watches every cannonball as if he's conducting an orchestra. You're ordered forward. You move through rubble that crunches like bones underfoot. The streets are clogged with the remnants of lives, chairs, pottery, a doll's head. Somewhere, a church bell rings once and collapses with a sound like the end of a hymn. A man next to you mutters, "If this is victory, I'd hate to see defeat." You laugh, because what else is there to do? The fighting lasts for hours, or maybe forever. Time folds in on itself when the air smells of powder and blood. You reload without thinking. Fire, duck, move. The rhythm becomes mechanical, detached. You hear someone scream in Polish. Another answer in Italian. A horse rears, neighing in terror. And then it stops. Just like that. The sound drains out of the world until there's only the crackling of fires and the soft moans of the wounded. You look up and realize the Russian army is gone. They've retreated again, disappeared into the east like smoke in wind. You slump against a broken wall. Around you, men stare in disbelief. "We took the city," someone says weakly. Another replies, "What's left of it?" That night, you sleep in what used to be a merchant's house. The walls are black with soot. You find a half-burned icon of a saint on the floor. Its painted eyes half melted but still watching you. You prop it up in a corner. It feels wrong to throw it away, even if you don't believe. Outside, the Emperor's aides scurry like shadows. You can hear Napoleon himself dictating orders, something about pursuit, reinforcements, logistics. He sounds calm, composed, almost cheerful, but when you look at the men around you, no one shares his optimism. You're all too tired. The smoke has settled into your clothes, your hair, your lungs. You cough, and it tastes like defeat. Someone jokes that the Russians are like ghosts. You can't kill them because they're already dead. Another man answers that maybe it's the French who are the ghosts, haunting a land that never wanted them. You all laugh, quietly, as if afraid the darkness might overhear. In the morning, you march again, always east, always towards the promise of something final. The road out of Smolensk is lined with trees that have been stripped bare by foragers. The branches look like arms reaching for the sky. The smell of rotten smoke clings to everything. One soldier, a young Italian named Bruno, keeps a journal. You've seen him scribbling by candlelight, recording everything, the dates, the places, the small miseries. You ask him why he bothers, and he says, "So someone remembers we were here." You tell him that's too depressing. He smiles and says, "History needs someone to pity." Later, when a wagon overturns and crushes his leg, he still tries to keep writing. You help carry him to the side of the road, and when the surgeons come with their saw, you walk away before you can hear the end of his sentence. That night, the officers tell you Smolensk was a victory. You look around at the fire still burning, the ruined faces, the blackened sky, and you wonder what word they're using for victory these days. Historians still debate whether Smolensk mattered strategically. Some call it a missed opportunity. Others say it broke the illusion of Russian weakness. You just remember the smell, the thick, oily scent of burned grain and wet ash, and the silence afterward. Weeks later, when someone asks what you saw there, you won't say a city. You'll say a warning. You pass more villages, more fields of nothing. The ground is pitted with shallow graves. You start to recognize the smell of death long before you see the bodies. Yet, somehow, you also get used to it. Humans can adapt to anything, apparently even the slow unravelling of hope. One morning, as the mist lifts, you see a column of captured Russian peasants being led westward. One of them looks at you, really looks, and there's no hatred in his eyes, just exhaustion. He says something in his language, soft and short. You ask what it means, and a fellow soldier translates, "Go home." You don't laugh this time. That night, a rumour spreads through the camp. The Emperor himself visited the front lines of Smolensk during the bombardment. Some say he stood in full view of the Russian cannons, completely unafraid. Others claim he was never there at all, that it's just another story to keep morale alive. You like the first version better. It feels warmer somehow. like believing in a legend before bed. The days blur again. The army grows thinner, quieter. Even the jokes start to fade. You notice men talking to themselves more often, muttering names and prayers under their breath. You dream of food now more than anything, not victory, not home, just bread that isn't hard, wine that isn't watered down, sleep without cold. But morning always comes, dragging you back into motion. The drums beat, the boots move, the horizon stretches. You tell yourself that maybe Moscow will be different. Maybe there, the fires will finally go out. As you trudge through the charred ruins of yet another village, you see a single white cat sitting on a fence post, licking its paw. It looks utterly indifferent to you, to Napoleon, to the whole damn war. You point it out to your friend Henri, and he laughs. See? Even the cats here are philosophers. You nod, smiling despite yourself. The cat jumps down and vanishes into the ash. Somewhere ahead, the smoke rises again, thicker, darker. You tighten your coat and keep walking. You're getting good at that, walking through fire like it's weather. The march to Moscow is still young, though it already feels ancient. You can sense the frost waiting at the edge of time, patient and merciless. But for now, it's still summer. For now. You tell yourself that the worst has already passed. You know better. Of course, but denial is warmer than truth. You wake up to sunlight that looks deceptively soft. The kind of morning that makes you forget, for a heartbeat, that you're in the middle of a war. The grass is tall and pale, bending in slow waves. You stretch your aching legs, and when you look down, your boots are dusted white. Not with frost, but with chalky summer dust. It's thick as flour, and it clings to everything. Your coat, your face, the very air. You cough, and it tastes like road. Today, you march again. You always do. The drums roll. The boots fall in rhythm. And you wonder if anyone remembers what music sounds like anymore. Somewhere behind you, a mule brays like it's laughing. You're not sure if that's comforting or insulting. By now, the Grande Armée is less of a single army and more like a moving ecosystem. Flies, sweat, broken wagons, prayers. You're part of a column that stretches for miles, winding through farmland that once promised abundance. You see wheat fields flattened by passing troops. Streams turn to soup by hooves. The summer heat is relentless, shimmering in waves across the horizon. The Russians keep retreating. It's like chasing a ghost that keeps leaving breadcrumbs made of smoke. Historians still debate whether the Russian generals meant to draw Napoleon deeper into the heart of their country, or if their retreat was forced by fear. You don't have time for debates. All you know is that every village looks the same. Empty windows, wells poisoned, fields burned. The smell of bread has become a myth. You pass a bakery once, its roof half collapsed, the oven still warm from whoever fled hours before. Inside you find a few loaves of black bread, hard as brick, but edible if you soak it in rainwater. You share it with Henri and a cavalryman named Jules. Henri laughs, breaking his piece in two. You know, he says, I think I prefer it this way, adds crunch. You snort. Maybe next time you can sprinkle gunpowder for seasoning. Ha, don't tempt me, I've eaten worse. You believe him? Everyone has by now. The road ahead hums with flies. Horses flick their tails in slow motion, their ribs showing under thin coats. You watch a line of Polish lancers ride past. Tall, proud, but hollow-eyed. One of them has tied a small mirror to his saddle, angled so he can see himself. You catch your reflection there for an instant, dust-caked, bearded, eyes sunken, and don't recognize the man looking back. The heat becomes an enemy in its own right. The sun beats down like judgment. You see mirages, ponds that vanish when you blink, trees that shimmer into thin air. The men start calling the horizon Napoleon's mirage. March toward that, Henri jokes. At least it never runs out of water. You both laugh, weakly. That night, camp feels like a mirage too. The fires burn low, wood is scarce, energy scarcer. You lie on your back and stare at the sky. The stars are painfully bright, like they're watching you with pity. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays an old tune from home. It's out of tune, but you hum along anyway. You think of Paris, the Seine glittering under lamplight, the sound of boots on cobblestone, the smell of baquets opening before dawn. You tell yourself that if you survive this, you'll never complain about the cold again. Then you laugh, because you already know you will. The next morning, a courier rides by shouting that supplies are finally catching up. Everyone cheers until they realise the wagons are full of mouldy flour and horse feed. You try to eat a biscuit that's older than some of the recruits. It crumbles like chalk in your mouth. Still, there are moments of absurdity that feel almost human. One afternoon, a group of soldiers finds a field of cucumbers that somehow escaped the scorched earth. They dive in like children, stuffing their mouths, cheering. You join them, biting into one that tastes like victory and regret. Henri grins through a mouthful. You think the Emperor eats cucumbers too? Only if they're shaped like a map of Europe, you answer. You both laugh so hard that nearby soldiers stare. It's the first time in days anyone's laughed without coughing. But then, just as quickly, the moment passes. A cannon rumbles somewhere ahead. The column slows. The Russians have set another town on fire, and the black smoke curls into the sky like a hand beckoning you onward. By evening, you reach the ruins. It was once a place called Vitebsk. Now it's a skeleton of stone. You camp among the wreckage. The Emperor arrives the next day, his carriage splattered with mud, his face unreadable. He rides past you, and for a second you think he looks smaller. Still magnificent, but human. Napoleon sets up headquarters in what's left of a governor's mansion. The rest of you scavenge wood from broken doors and furniture. You roast whatever's left of the food, mostly roots and stolen chickens. You tell jokes around the fire, because silence is worse. "Imagine," says Jules, "if Moscow's just another empty field." "Then at least we'll have space," Henri replies. You grin, shaking your head. "We'll need a very big tent." Even the laughter sounds tired now. A week passes in Vitebsk. Some men hope Napoleon will stop here for the winter. You'd like that. The idea of staying still feels revolutionary. But then, one morning, the drums sound again. Orders, always orders. You're moving east. Napoleon, they say, told his marshals, the war will end at Moscow. You wonder if he ever considers that maybe the war will end you first. Historians still debate whether the Emperor hesitated at Vitebsk. Some say he sensed the danger, that he considered stopping. Others claim his ambition overruled his caution. Either way, you march on, through roads that seem to stretch forever, bordered by the ghost of a country that refuses to be caught. The dust gets worse. It seeps into your teeth, your eyes, your dreams. You wake coughing. You walk coughing. It's as if the earth itself is trying to choke you out. Once, during a rest stop, you see Napoleon himself dismount, remove his gloves, and touch the ground. Just touch it, like he's testing whether Russia is real. For a second, he looks almost contemplative. Then he stands, dusts off his hand, and gives an order that sends another division marching toward nowhere. That night, Henri says, maybe he's in love with Russia. You reply, if he is, it's the kind of love that kills you. He nods, smiling faintly. The best kind, then. The next morning, the sky turns a strange yellow-grey again, and you feel that faint, almost inaudible shift in the air, the prelude to something colder. You notice frost on the edges of leaves, though it's still August, a thin, ghostly shimmer that vanishes when you blink. You rub your hands together, pretending not to notice. The horses snort uneasily. Even the birds seem quieter. Someone mutters that maybe the Russians have made a deal with the weather. They're summoning winter early, he says. Then they should have summoned a dinner first, Henri grumbles. You laugh, but it's weak. The wind is starting to sting. You pull your coat tighter. By evening, the dust and heat return as if the cold was only a rehearsal. But you can't shake it. You know now that the frost isn't far away. You can almost feel it watching from the tree line. That night, as you drift into uneasy sleep, you dream of Moscow, towers of gold, domes that glow under a crimson sky. You walk its empty streets, and the only sound is snow crunching under your boots. You wake before dawn, shivering though the fire's still warm. Henri's already awake, stirring what's left of the soup pot. He looks up at you and says, "You were talking in your sleep, said something about frost." You nod, rubbing your eyes. "Guess I'm just getting ahead of the story." He chuckles softly. "Careful, the story might be getting ahead of us." You don't answer. You just watch the sky lighten. Another day beginning, another step east. The march continues, slow, endless, beautiful in its futility, and somewhere, far beyond the haze and dust, the ghost of winter breathes on the edge of the world. You see him before you hear him, Napoleon, the Emperor, the myth with mud on his boots. The army has stopped for the evening, and the men are gathered near the edge of a shallow valley, cooking whatever they can scrounge. A rumour ripples through the ranks like static. He's coming. You don't quite believe it at first. You've been marching for months and have only seen him as a speck on a distant hill or a silhouette lit by firelight. The officers talk about him as if he's both everywhere and nowhere at once. But now he's right there. He rides along the column with a calm that feels impossible. The men straighten, even the sick ones. His coat is dark blue, his bicorn hat at that perfect angle. Every inch of him calculated, even the silence that trails behind his horse. And that's the strangest part, the silence. You expected trumpets, shouting, a storm of command, but instead it's quiet. The only sounds are the horse's hooves and the faint creak of leather. He looks at you for half a second, and you feel something sharp pass through you. Not warmth, not fear, but significance. Like you've just been added to a story larger than yourself. Then he moves on. The men murmur after he's gone, like they've just seen a comet. Henri, of course, has a joke ready. He looks shorter in person, he whispers. You grin. That's because we're standing in the mud elevates us. The two of you laugh quietly, even as the officers glare. It feels good to laugh in front of a myth. It reminds you that you're still human. Later, as the fires burn low, you hear the officers reading out orders. Advance toward Borodino. Another battle. Another chance for glory, or for frostbite, depending on how you define luck. Napoleon has ordered a review of the troops in the morning. The word review spreads like honey through exhaustion. You'll march in formation. Show him your uniforms, your muskets, or your faces. Maybe he'll remember you, maybe he won't. But for tonight, it feels almost like theatre. And you're all actors rehearsing the idea of victory. The next morning dawns gold and wet. Dew clings to your boots as you form ranks. Drums tap a heartbeat into the air. Napoleon rides past again, slower this time, taking everything in. His face is hard to read. He doesn't look triumphant or even satisfied. He looks thoughtful, calculating, like he's already seeing something you can't yet imagine. One of the marshals says something to him. You can't hear the words, but Napoleon just nods slightly, never breaking his stare from the horizon. Do you think he ever smiles? Henri asks under his breath. You squint. Maybe only when he's winning. Henri chuckles. Then we'd better hurry, his face might crack from waiting. You manage not to laugh out loud. The Emperor's horse turns sharply, and the whole column goes rigid again. After the review, you march on, through forests that smell like pine and old ghosts. The ground softens under your boots, and you notice frost forming again in the mornings. It vanishes by noon, but the warning is there, nature sharpening her knives. That evening, you help dig fire pits. Smoke curls up into a purple skis. You can hear music from somewhere in camp, an accordion, faint singing in Polish. The melody is almost cheerful, which feels like rebellion in itself. Historians still debate whether Napoleon knew, at this point, that the Russian army was waiting for him near Borodino, or if he simply marched by instinct, drawn east by something beyond logic. Some call it strategy, others call it obsession. You just know it feels like walking toward the centre of a storm. You sit near the fire with Henri and a handful of others. The talk drifts between memories and nonsense. Someone wonders aloud what Moscow looks like. I heard it's made of gold, Jules says, poking at the flames with a stick. Then I'll take a brick home, Henri replies. You smirk. If there's anything left of it by the time we get there. They laugh, but you can see the doubt flicker in their eyes. Later that night, while the others sleep, you wander a little away from camp. The moon is full, washing everything in pale silver. You find yourself thinking about Napoleon again, how quiet he was, how still. It's strange. The closer you get to him, the quieter he seems to make the world, as if everything bends around his focus. You imagine what it must be like inside his head, a map of Europe spread across his thoughts, every road and river a thread he's trying to pull tight. They say he barely eats, barely sleeps. You believe it, you saw it in his eyes. Not hunger for food, but for order, for perfection. Maybe that's what makes him terrifying. He's not chasing glory, he's chasing symmetry. You can't sleep after that. The sky lightens, the fires die, and before you know it, you're marching again. The landscape changes slowly, rolling hills giving way to endless plains. You pass the smouldering ruins of villages that once had names you'll never learn. Sometimes you see the aftermath of the Russian army's retreat, wagons overturned, livestock slaughtered, everything rendered useless. It's as if they're erasing their own country to deny you the satisfaction of conquering it. One morning, A soldier finds a single loaf of fresh bread inside a burned farmhouse. It's still warm, untouched. The whole platoon stares at it like it's a holy relic. The man who found it breaks it into pieces, hands shaking. You take a piece and bite in. It's soft, sweet, impossibly real. Henri whispers, "A miracle." You grin through your mouthful. Saint Boulanger, patron of starving soldiers. He laughs so hard he almost drops his share. A few hours later, the smell of smoke returns, this time carried by a colder wind. You pass through another ruined field, and this time you notice something strange. A small wooden cross stuck into the ground, painted blue, with a child's toy tied to it. You stop for a second. It's a little horse carved from wood. Its head is missing. You don't know why, but that detail, the missing head, stays with you all day. That night, you dream of the Emperor again. In the dream, he's standing in a field of snow, staring at a map that stretches to the horizon. His hands are bare, his breath fogging the air. He looks up at you and says, "History is just weather with uniforms." Then the wind takes him away. When you wake, the real wind is howling through camp. You pull your coat tighter and notice frost glittering on your blanket. This time it doesn't melt when the sun rises. The frost is here to stay. That day, Napoleon gathers his marshals near a hill overlooking the road. You can see them from a distance, small dark figures against the light. The Emperor gestures eastward, his gloved hand slicing through the air like a knife. You can't hear the words, but you can feel them, the command, the inevitability. You're going to Borodino. The name means nothing to you yet. Just another village, another stretch of road, but when the officers pass down the order, their faces are grim. You ask why, and one of them mutters, "Because that's where the Russians stop running." You look out across the land, endless and golden under the late summer sun. You think of everything you've walked through, mud, ash, heat, hunger, and you realise that this might finally be it, the place where everything that's been stretched thin will snap. As the column starts to move, Henri claps you on the shoulder. "Well," he says, "maybe he'll finally smile tomorrow." You nod, adjusting your pack. "Let's give him a reason, then." The march to Borodino begins under skies the colour of tarnished silver. Somewhere far ahead, cannons already whisper their warm-up notes. The Emperor rides at the front, silent, his shadow long across the ground. You follow, and for the first time since the river crossing, you can smell something new on the wind. Not smoke, not rot, just iron. The smell of battle. You feel the ground shiver before you hear the drums. Dawn is barely a suggestion, a pale slip of light sliding under the cloud cover, and already the earth is humming with intent. You rub grit from your eyes, taste iron in the air, and realise the battlefield is breathing. Borodino, the name sits in your mouth like a pebble you can't swallow. You shoulder your musket and step into a world sketched in charcoal. Low ridges, damp grass, black silhouettes of guns, and, far ahead, those ugly shapes the officers kept whispering about last night. The fleshes, someone said they looked like arrowheads stabbed into the dirt. You thought that was poetic. Now you see them and think, no, they look like trouble. The Emperor has been awake since before you. Word is he's pacing, reading reports, pinning the map with his finger the way a tailor pins cloth, trying to stitch a hole closed. You catch a glimpse of him through the mist, short, wrapped in that eternal grey coat, speaking quietly to a cluster of marshals. He points toward your future, and dozens of aides-de-camp gallop away, as if he just snapped the strings on them like they were kites. The first cannon speaks. It's not so much a sound as a push, a blunt hand against your chest. Your breath stumbles, then the others answer. 100 angry throats, and the air is suddenly a crowded, frantic place. The army begins to move in sheets, the way rain does when a wind gust shoves it sideways. You go with it. You always do. A drummer boy to your left drops his stick, and without missing a beat, picks up a spoon from his pocket and keeps drumming. You stare, then grin in spite of yourself. He shrugs like, "What, you didn't bring spare cutlery for the apocalypse?" It's the tiniest, silliest bravery, and it warms you for exactly one beat before the next cannonball tears the field in half. Historians still debate whether Napoleon's plan here was elegant or exhausted, whether he meant to smash the left at the fleshes hard enough to pry the Russian line open, or whether he just threw weight at the nearest hinge because every hinge felt rusty now. You're not a historian, you're a set of legs, a pair of lungs, a heart trying not to imitate a rabbit. You march when they say march, you stop when they say stop, you become a moving line. The smoke arrives early, rolling low along the ground, sweet and bitter all at once, powder, trampled grass, the mineral breath of torn earth. The sun is a smudged coin in a dirty sky. You've never been this awake and this sleepy at the same time. The cannons are syllables, the muskets punctuation, and the drumline is a pulse you pretend is yours. You meet the ground before you meet the enemy, a shallow ditch, a berm, a patch of thistles. You don't remember when you started crawling, you just find yourself with elbows muddy, cheek pressed to soil that trembles from distant hooves. Someone yells, "Forward!" in a voice like a cracked bell, and everybody stands up at once because everybody is afraid of being the last to stand. The Fletches spit fire. Bagration's men, wiry, angry shadows rise and vanish like a bad dream flickering. You fire because the man next to you fires. The recoil jars your shoulder, a kind of useful pain. I am here. I exist. I can push back. You bite a cartridge and feel the paper grit between your teeth. Somewhere off to the right, a cavalry trumpet slices the air so clean you could shave with it. Henri shouts in your ear, "If we capture those arrowheads, I'm pinning one to my hat." You cough, "Dull." Smile. Take two. You'll have a match set for Sundays. He snorts, then ducks as a shell throws dirt into the sky like confetti for a party no one wants. Hours become minutes, minutes become hours. You don't mark time, the guns do. Murat's cavalry goes like a river of blonde hair and ridiculous feathers, a parade that took a wrong turn into hell. Ney's infantry heaves forward in blocks that look solid until the first volley chews rectangles out of them. Davout's men shoulder past you at one point, faces set, steps neat, discipline wrapped around them like armour, and you think, that's what confidence looks like up close. Then a round shot takes a chunk out of the road and the whole column ripples like a flag in a sudden wind. Confidence trembles, steadies, keeps marching. You catch the strangest sights between blasts. A grenadier pauses mid-run to bow theatrically at a cannon that just missed him, then sprints on, laughing like a man who lost a bet. A priest holds up a tiny brass cross in the smoke. Men kiss it without slowing, each a quick peck as if blessing might be contagious if you brush past it fast enough. A horse, eyes white as porcelain, rears and then freezes, statue still, until a groom whispers in its ear and the spell breaks, or, by mid-morning, you've been ordered toward the Fletches twice and backwards once, and your legs have begun to feel like they were borrowed from a stranger. The ground inside those earthworks is a clawed mess, churned, broken, slick with mud, scattered with things that used to be tools and now are only shapes. You step, slip, catch yourself on a gun carriage, and realise the wheel is warm, almost hot. From the friction of recoil, the cannon crew works with the bored frosty of men building a wall against the tide. Sponge, load, aim, fire, repeat until either the tide gives up or the wall does. A rumour reaches you like a paper boat floating along a gutter. Bagration's wounded. Another. He's dead. Another. No, he's swearing and refuses to leave. Historians still debate the timing of his mortal wound and its real effect on the Russian defence. But you feel something subtle change in the pressure of the day, like the wind shifted a few degrees, enough to make the smoke drift a new way. Henri bumps your shoulder. "You hungry?" You bark a laugh. "Always." He produces half a cucumber from somewhere inside his coat, the same miracle vegetable you all found weeks ago, and breaks it, giving you the larger piece. It's cold, absurdly crisp. You take a bite while a battery to your left erupts in unison, and for a second the world is perfectly insane, thunder and salad. "We're starting a trend," he says. "Battlefield cuisine." "Next course is lead," you answer, but you're smiling, and the cucumber tastes like a stupid, perfect memory of green. The Fletches turn into a tug-of-war with shovels. You take them, the Russians take them back. You take them again with a roar that feels pulled from under your ribs. Every time you clamber over the lip, you expect the ground to reject you. Every time you fall inside, you expect the sky to slam shut. Instead, it's a narrow, filthy strip of world full of men behaving like mirrors. Each side loads, aims, fires, reloads, as if copying the other's handwriting. Somewhere south, the great redoubt, the Raevsky battery, looms like a tooth the dentist gave up on. You can't see it from where you are, but you feel it. A stubborn anchor in the Russian line. flinging iron into the French as if the earth itself is coughing. Later, someone will say that the redoubt changed hands, that cavalry actually charged a fort and lived to tell it, that the impossible briefly shrugged and allowed itself. Later, you'll decide which version to believe. Now, the redoubt is a rumour that hurts to think about. Around noon, the air becomes so thick with powder that your tongue goes numb. You sip from your canteen and it tastes like tea brewed from an old musket. Every shout is a rasp. Every order is a gesture. You watch an officer draw a square in the air with his sword and suddenly 1,000 men rearrange themselves into meaning. The choreography is beautiful and terrible. If war were a dance, Borodino would be the part where the floor collapses and the music keeps going. You find yourself near a battery just as it receives a fresh line of ammunition wagons. The drivers look relieved, then terrified, then relieved again. A 3-step cycle that repeats every minute. A gunner with soot-blackened teeth tells you, conversational as a grocer, that he's fired so many rounds his piece has a personality now. She's a soprano, he says. Listen, he fires. The gun shrieks like a boiling kettle. You nod gravely and tell him she's very talented. He grins and blows you a kiss with a powder-stained hand. The Emperor, they say, has taken a position at the Shevardino Redoubt's ruins, where he can see nearly everything and, by seeing it, bend it. You try to imagine his view. A scroll of earth unrolled, the fleshes like stitches, the redoubt like a knuckle, rivers of men flowing, eddying, turning white at the edges where they foam. Does he love this? Does he hate it? Does he feel anything except the pressure of a world asking to be arranged? Historians still debate whether he should have hurled the Imperial Guard forward in the afternoon to punch through the Russian centre, whether that one withheld fist was prudence or paralysis. What you feel is simpler. The day is a coin spinning. Nobody knows yet which face will show. In the early afternoon, a lull that isn't a lull, the guns step back for breath. The infantry kneels to reload in relative peace, and the wind clears the field for a minute. You see colour again. Flags, blood, the bright ridiculous blue of a marshal's sash. A raven flaps overhead. Bored and offended, somebody near you dares a joke. If Moscow is at the end of this road, I hope it has soup. You add, and spoons, our drummer used his... The drummer, overhearing, raises his spoon like a trophy without missing a beat. A whole volley erupts down the line, and the spoon keeps time as if the gods themselves require cutlery to make war. You're sent forward again. The fleshes are ours. No, now they're theirs. No, ours again. You trip on a loosened gabion and tumble into a heap with 3 other men, all of you swearing softly because swearing loudly uses too much air. One of them is Jules the cavalryman, on foot now, hat gone, hair plastered to his forehead. Borrowed a different horse, he pants. Names left leg and right leg. Terrible temper, but reliable. You wheeze a laugh. Stubborn beasts, hard to groom. Tell me about it, he says. And then you both stand, because someone has blown a whistle that means, if you're not moving, you're dying. Toward evening, the light tilts, and with it your sense of time, the field, mud, splintered wood, mangled wheels, glows a sickly gold. You watch smoke pour out of the redoubt as if the hill is exhaling. The French flag surge, falter, surge. For a moment that will live forever in your bones, you think the entire day leans forward, then the hill flattens into a silhouette you do not recognise, and a cheer moves through the lines like a wind in wheat. You're cheering and you're not sure why, except that your mouth needed to... Victories on a day like this feel like finding a chair in a burning house. You sit, you sigh, and you realise the chair is on fire too. The Russians don't break. They bend, they bleed, but they don't snap. The daylight bleeds out of the sky and the guns keep working, smaller, meaner, as if they're embarrassed to be heard at night. Your ears ring like church bells after a wedding. A sergeant tries to count what's left of your company and gives up, muttering that arithmetic isn't meant for days like this. Someone near you makes coffee in a tin cup so dented it looks like it lost a fistfight. It's black as midnight and tastes like burned chicory and hope. You sip and watch sparks drift up from a shattered caisson. Fireflies with bad intentions. If we win, Henri says softly, I want 2 spoons, 1 for soup, 1 for music. You bump his shoulder. Add a fork. We'll finally eat something you can stab without getting court-martialed. He laughs, the thin kind that lives near tears, and offers you the last of the coffee. You shake your head. He needs it more. Night collects your edges. The last exchanges of the day judder along the line. Ragged volleys, stubborn batteries. You can hear the surgeons somewhere behind you. Saws singing their hard songs, and you don't look back. You never look back at night. Stars press through the smoke as if they've been waiting their turn. What is Borodino? You'll spend years answering that, maybe forever. Historians still debate whether it was a French victory, because the French held the field, or a Russian one, because the Russian army withdrew in order, unbroken, and Napoleon's aim to destroy it failed. They argue about casualties astounding on both sides, about whether Kutuzov yielded ground to save his army, about whether the Grande Armée left too much of itself behind on this one terrible day to ever be whole again. They'll draw diagrams and circle the moments when the coin might have fallen another way. You will remember the drummer's spoon, the cucumber, and a horse that listened to a whispered secret. You'll remember the way the fleshes seemed to breathe under your boots. You'll remember how the air tasted like a key held in the mouth, how every cough had a spark in it. You'll remember a laugh you shared when the world said it wasn't a good time for laughter. You'll remember that when the shouting ended, the silence was so complete you could hear the night step closer. A courier rides by with the last message of the day, words you'll never read, addressed to men whose names are already fading in your ears. The Emperor is somewhere behind you now, a small tireless star moving across a private sky. Did he hold back too much? Did he spend too much? Did he win? Did he lose? Tonight, those questions are like the stars, bright, distant, beyond your reach. You lie down in the churned dirt and pull your coat over your shoulders. The ground is warm where the guns stood, cold where the shadows pooled. Henri mumbles that if you snore, he'll trade you to the Russians for a blanket. You tell him the Russians couldn't afford you. Not at your current market value, which is 1 spoon and a cucumber. He snores anyway. Tomorrow, you'll stand again too. For now. You let your breath match the rhythm of distant hooves. You tell your heart to slow its march. You think of Moscow like a coin at the bottom of a well, maybe close, maybe far, shimmering in the last light. You close your eyes on a day that used every colour and every sound and paid you in smoke. The night presses a cool hand to your forehead, and for one brief, blessed moment, you believe that sleep is a place no army can invade. You don't march into Moscow so much as wander into it like a sleepwalker who's followed a dream across half a continent. After Borodino, the world feels muffled. Orders come through wool. Hoofbeats sound like they're wrapped in snow. You cross the green, undulating fields and the low villages thin to almost nothing. And then the land lifts its curtain, and there it is, a city of onion domes and pale walls, glittering under a colourless sky. Moscow, more a vision than a place. The kind of skyline that seems to speak in bells even when the bells are silent. The first thing you notice is how quiet it is. No press of crowds, no market din, no buzz of curiosity, only the peculiar echo of your own boots on unfamiliar streets. You expected fanfare or fury, maybe both. Instead, you get an emptiness so deliberate it feels like a trick. Windows stare back like unblinking eyes, doors hang ajar, 100 mouths saying nothing. A paper blows by that once carried news and now carries only ash. You don't know this yet, but the city has been half emptied. The governor, a man with a name that tastes of flint, Rostopchin, has hustled the people away, shoving them toward the east in carts and on foot, snatching valuables, leaving behind a stage set where the audience fled the theatre before the play began. Historians still debate whether he ordered the fire you will soon see, whether he released convicts to fan the flames, whether it was strategy or chaos or some wild negotiation between the two. All you know is that you're here, sore and stupendous with survival, and the city accepts you with no more fuss than a snowfall. The Emperor rides in by the Dorogomilov Gate on September 14th. Your calendar has started to carve the days into your bones, and for one heartbeat you feel victory thrum under your ribs. This was always the promise. Reach Moscow and everything will make sense again. A palace for headquarters, stores packed with grain, a winter spent warm under painted ceilings while the Tsar comes to his senses. The rumour, rolled flat between fingers until it shines, is that the war ends here. Inside these pale walls, you inhale and wait for the taste of it. But Moscow tastes like something else. At first, it's just a thread of smoke, a kitchen fire somewhere, maybe a careless spark. You keep walking, you pass a church with blues so bright they look wet. You pass a mansion with lions frozen on the gateposts, jaws open in silent roars. The men fan out, brittle with caution, drawn by the gravity of doors. Some carry fire buckets, others axes. Officers bark warnings against looting, and the warnings echo like theatre lines in an empty house. Henri edges close to you, eyes big. Feels like the city went to lunch, he says. Left the door unlocked, you reply. How polite. He grins. Maybe there's soup. Maybe there's spoons, you add automatically. And he snorts, your old joke returning like a stray dog that somehow found your new address. You pass a long, low building and smell tallow, soap, and something sweet. A soldier breaks a window and discovers a perfume warehouse. The air turns dizzy with lilies, violets, a tar of roses. Men dab their necks and laugh. Hard men smelling like ballrooms. One fellow, enthusiastic, pours cologne into a lantern as fuel. The flame flares and he yelps, eyebrows shortened into punctuation marks. You tell him gently it was a bold experiment in aromatic warfare, and he nods solemnly, as if you've just promoted him to Marshal of Scents. By afternoon, the little fires are bigger, smoke walks the streets, you watch a spark climb from a pile of rags to a window frame like a clever animal, and by the time a bucket line begins, the window is already a mouth with orange teeth. Soldiers shout, drag furniture into courtyards, form ad hoc brigades, cough, wave hats. The wind arrives, a pushy guest with too much energy, and the little fires suddenly understand what they want to be when they grow up. You're ordered toward the Kremlin, the city's old heart, antique and stubborn, walls like a necklace of red stone. The Emperor chooses it for his headquarters. The rumour engine says he prefers his usual camp bed even in palaces. You imagine him setting that familiar cot in gilded rooms the way a man sets a plain mug on a carved table and drinks the same coffee. A refusal to let surroundings tell him who he is. Another officer says he saw Napoleon stand on a balcony and watch the smoke roll like a black sea, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. All this, the officer murmurs, and he still looks like he's measuring a dress hem. Twilight falls in copper sheets. Then the night pounces. The first firestorm rises in Zamoskvorekie, south of the river. And it's not like any fire you've ever seen. It doesn't creep, it leaps. Whole streets are swallowed. Roofs lift, flutter, collapse, throw sparks into the next block, the next world. Churches burn with sugar candy domes melting into bright tears. Wooden mansions snap like violins. The wind takes flaming shingles and sails them down boulevards as if delivering mail. You help carry a pump, one of the city's few, and discover the hoses are stiff, the fittings uncooperative. French, Italian, Polish hands wrestle with the Russian brass while the fire strolls by, unimpressed. A group of soldiers forms a line from a well, buckets sloshing, and for 10 minutes the flames appear to hesitate, as if acknowledging your choreography. Then a door bursts open and the interior inhales, exhales, and your face goes hot enough to feel the hairs singe. You back away, blinking black tears. Someone's lighting them, a grenadier whispers. They keep appearing in places with no reason. Or everywhere is a reason now, you say, because the city is mostly wood, and the wind does not negotiate. Still you notice shadows flitting where no soldiers stand. You hear shouts in Russian, and the heavy thud of boots that aren't yours. Historians still debate whether arson squads moved through Moscow that night at someone's command, whether police and convicts set costs and calculations ablaze. Your throat tastes like a burnt nail. You decide that debates are for rooms that are not currently on fire. Inside the Kremlin, officers argue. Napoleon refuses to leave at first. It seems important to him, staying put, centering the map with his body, the way a captain stands on a burning deck until the last order is given. You try to sleep in a cloistered court with stone cool enough to make your cheek ache. Your dreams are bright, dangerous, and loud, like fireworks whose purpose is not celebration but instruction. Everything that can burn will burn, and everything that will not burn will watch. At dawn, ash falls like late summer snow. The city is a ghost that forgot its lines, wandering from ruin to ruin. You walk past a street where houses survive by accident, untouched islands in a sea of char. A cat, white again, philosophically indifferent, sits on a windowsill washing its face with a paw blackened at the tips. You salute it. It blinks, unimpressed. Even the cats here are still philosophers, callback confirmed. A regiment finds a cellar full of sugar. Men come up white-faced like spirits, licking fingers, bagging lumps, laughing with cracked lips. Someone dissolves sugar in hot water and calls it tea. Someone else adds a splash of perfume by mistake and insists it's a fashionable syrup. In Saint-Cloud, absolutely capotle, you sip and sputter. We have invented dessert that can see ghosts, you announce, and a few men nearly choke laughing. Humour works best when it's slightly poisonous. You explore a mansion where ballrooms survived and kitchens didn't. In a closet, you discover costumes, velvets and brocades, boots with silver tassels, hats wide enough to shade a horse, a pair of dragoons strut in boyar robes, one wearing a crown of theatre tin. For half a minute, the hallway becomes a pageant. Then a beam groans overhead and everybody remembers gravity and dashes out. There's trailing. Later, you'll swear you saw a man in a peacock blue coat rescuing a barrel of pickles with royal dignity. Keep that, Henri says, pointing at the coat. If this soldier thing doesn't work out, you can be a chandelier. I shine already, you reply. On the inside. He nods gravely. Tragic for visibility. The Emperor finally relocates from the Kremlin for a day when explosions crawl too close. Powder stores go up with noises you feel behind your teeth. Then he returns, as if refusing to yield even to the idea of retreat from a map's centre. Scribes bring reports, marshals bring questions, smoke brings smoke. You hear that he's ordered fire brigades formed from guard units, that patrols seize suspected arsonists, that any Frenchman caught looting will be shot. You see a few men tied to posts. The sentences read with clipped legality, the shots echoing sharper than cannon because they are so near. It's hard to say whether discipline burns brighter than desire. The city's light drowns all comparisons. At noon, the wind settles. A hush arrives so sudden your ears ring with the absence of roar. You step into a street that is only charcoal, a drawing of itself. The domes on the horizon rise out of smoke like prayerful balloons. Somewhere a bell tolls. Just one note, stubborn and oddly kind, as if reminding the air that time still exists. It hits you then. The emptiness isn't silence. It's a sound you're not used to hearing, your own breathing in a city that will not breathe with you. You speak just to prove you can. We're here. You tell the street. It does not answer. Legitimate history does its tally while you stand and blink. The Great Fire of Moscow will burn for days, 2, 3, some say 5, depending on who measured and where. 2/3 of the city goes, wooden suburbs especially. Mansions, warehouses, markets, churches, thousands of buildings collapse into warmth and then into memory. The French will form bucket lines, post guards, rescue icons, drink out of porcelain cups because the tin ones melted, dine on pickled mushrooms with silver forks because the iron ones warped. You will sleep in a church vestibule because the stones are still cool. You will wake when the roof above you murmurs, and you will move because you have learned the dialect of collapse. Quirky fact for your private museum, you find an entire room of clocks, all stopped at different hours, as if time tried to escape and couldn't pick a door. Henri sets one to the current minute and it refuses to tick. Respect, he says. Even time takes a knee in Moscow. You pocket a tiny travel clock with a cracked face and imagine it keeping not time but courage, useless, pretty, and heavier than it looks. Days trickle like molasses. The army scavenges. Some men sleep under fur canopies and wake with fleas that have read Voltaire. Others huddle in stone barns and swear the bricks whisper. You discover a vendor's stall half intact and buy, with a ridiculous coin, a jar of dried cherries that taste like a sunny street you once knew. You share them with Henri and Jules. This is cuisine, Jules declares. We are eating fruit that survived a city. You nod. We're connoisseurs of stubbornness. You carry water. You stamp out embers. You learn street names that immediately change into ashes. A French patrol marches by in perfect step through a lane where every window has melted into a grin. The contrast is painful and beautiful, the geometry of men against the geometry of ruins. Historians still debate whether Napoleon should have turned west immediately after the fire, whether waiting those crucial weeks was hope or hubris. He waited, expecting negotiation, a letter, a messenger with terms tucked in his boot. You begin to understand the weight of waiting. It sits on your shoulders like a coat that grows a button every day. At night, the frost breathes on the edges of your blanket. The rumours you carried all summer, surrender, supplies, a civilized winter, start shedding their feathers. You listen for the Caesar's reply in the wind and hear only the thin music of burnt rafters shifting. You imagine the Emperor at his small desk, candle eating its own length, pen scratching at a war that refuses to climb into a sentence. Maybe he's right, Henri says one evening, voice small in a broad corridor stripped by flame. Maybe peace rides a slow horse. You tilt your head. If so, hours through a shoe. He smiles, but it's a tired smile, the kind that remembers a joke and borrows it for one more night. One afternoon you're posted near Kitay-Gorod, a honeycomb of shops that once buzzed and now hums with absence. A shutter bangs and you startle. A man steps out. Old, grizzled, his left sleeve pinned where an arm should be. He looks at you the way the cat did. But with more years in his eyes, he says something low in Russian. You don't understand, and so both of you smile in that embarrassed way strangers have when they share a disaster and no language. He points to the east, then to your boots, then back to the east again. You understand that part. The rest remains a puzzle you will not solve. You wonder, as you stand in the smoke-thinned noon, if Moscow is the goal or the mirror. You wanted a prize, a warm room, a word that ends sentences. Instead, the city holds up what you dragged here. Exhaustion, belief, and the stubborn salt that keeps a soldier's heart from going bland. The frost is no longer a rumour. It's a neighbour who has moved in upstairs and practices the same scales every night. You wrap your coat tighter and pretend you don't hear it. The Emperor tours the ruins again and again. He's smaller when he walks, larger when he stops. He asks questions with a surgeon's neatness. He receives answers that do not heal. He still hopes for a letter. You feel hope too, because hope is a muscle you've exercised to absurdity, and it spasms by habit. But as the nights lengthen, the fires shrink to sullen eyes in the ash. The city has said its piece. On your last evening before the weather changes its tone from whisper to speech, you walk the riverbank. The water is a ribbon of pewter. A burned bridge stains its own reflection. The domes, soot-darkened, are bedtime stories that forgot how they end. You find the white cat again, this time perched on a fallen cornice like a small, disdainful gargoyle. We tried, you tell it. The cat yawns, an opera of indifference, and pads away toward a pile of still-warm stones as if choosing a new throne. You turn back toward the Kremlin, somewhere inside. A clerk sharpens a pen, a guard stamps his feet, a general warms his hands over a clever little stove. You think of the drummer's spoon, the beat that refused to break. You think of cucumbers in dust, a mirror tied to a saddle, Saint Boulange blessing a brick of bread. You think of how the city received you with a silence that had a job to do. Tomorrow will be colder. You can feel it in your teeth. Your breath already ghosts the air. There are no cheers left when you lie down. Only the soft rustle of men who still believe that sleep can be negotiated with. The walls around you smell of old incense and new ash. On the floor, your tiny travel clock makes no sound at all. You place it under your hat as if silence needs shelter. "Good night, Moscow," Henri whispers. You answer without opening your eyes. She's not asleep, she's just pretending. Outside, the frost rehearses. Inside, you pull your coat over your head and pretend with the city, because sometimes pretending is the only bridge you have. You wake before dawn to silence thick enough to hear your pulse. Moscow, that impossible jewel, now lies soldering under a skin of frost. You breathe in and taste cinders. The fires have eaten their fill, and the city exhales only ghosts, thin threads of smoke that rise lazily into a sky the colour of pewter. You sit up slowly, joints complaining like old wood, and realise what's missing. The crackle, the roar, even the arguments. Everything that could burn has burned, and everything that could scream has gone hoarse. It's the quiet after appetite. Henri is already awake, sitting on the steps of the ruined church you've been sleeping in. His hands are cupped around a tin cup that might once have been shiny. Steam curls from it. "Coffee?" you ask, hopeful. "Hot water and imagination," he says, taking a sip. "Close enough." You take the cup when he offers it and swallow. It's bitter, metallic, and somehow sacred. The Emperor hasn't left the Kremlin. That's what the sentries whisper. He walks its echoing halls, dictating letters that vanish into the winter air. He expects an answer from the Tsar, but none comes. Every day the couriers return empty-handed, the horizon stretching its silence like a curtain. Historians still debate whether Napoleon believed Alexander would negotiate, or whether he stayed because admitting defeat was harder than freezing. You can't judge him for that. Everyone here has something they're refusing to let go of. Home, pride, the sound of laughter before the fire. The soldiers are restless. They roam through ruins that look like the skeleton of an empire, scavenging for nails, candles, even bits of wallpaper to burn. You help one man pull down a half-collapsed door, the hinges squealing like a complaint from the past. The smoke that rises smells faintly of cinnamon. "Expensive wood," Henri says. "Royal," you reply, "probably illegal in France." He grins. "Everything worth having is..." You laugh, but it's the thin kind, the laughter of men who know the joke's on them. By noon, the sky begins to snow without conviction. Flakes drift down, hesitant as if testing the idea. The men stretch out their hands to catch them. For a moment, the camp looks like a festival, faces turned upward, tongues out, "All of you children" again. Then the wind picks up, sharp and deliberate, and you realise the flakes aren't melting when they touch the ground. They're staying. The first frost. It's beautiful, yes, but beauty is a luxury you can't afford. Frost is hunger in its polite form, and it never travels alone. He says nothing, just nods once, the kind of nod that weighs a ton and moves on. "Did he just thank us or sentence us?" Henri asks quietly. "Probably both. You say, 'Je dis,' before sleep takes you. You listen to the land. It's quieter now, but not at peace. The field mutters, cooling iron, settling wheels, the soft thud of steps lifting the wounded. Somewhere, someone sings a verse of a song that used to be about love and is now about going home. The melody climbs, stumbles, stands again. You see the Emperor that evening, finally riding through the camp. His coat is buttoned high, his hat pulled low, his face is pale, expression unreadable. The men straighten as he passes, because habit is stronger than despair. He stops near a small fire, your fire, and for a moment his gaze meets yours. His eyes are strange, focused, distant, like he's staring through layers of history to see which one belongs to him. That night, the frost grows teeth. Your breath curls like smoke, your fingers ache, and the small fire refuses to last. The wood hisses, sputters, dies. You wrap your coat tighter and stare at the embers. The stars look close enough to break on. Someone begins to sing, a low tune in Italian. It winds through the camp like a thread. The words are about home, always about home. You close your eyes and let the sound cover you like a blanket too thin to warm but too kind to throw away. In the morning, orders come. The Emperor wants to move supplies, secure the outskirts, prepare for winter quarters. Everyone knows it's a lie told gently. There will be no comfortable winter here. The Russian army waits beyond the horizon, and the countryside beyond Moscow has already been stripped bare. You march through the suburbs, what's left of them. Charred beams stick out of the snow like the ribs of dead giants. You find a bakery somehow still standing, its windows black with soot. Inside there's nothing, no flour, no yeast, no warmth. But on the wall, written in charcoal, someone has scrawled a single word in Russian. You ask a local prisoner what it means. He spits into the snow and says, "Wait!" That night, the word follows you into your dreams. Wait, for what? The Tsar, the thaw, the end? A week later, the snow begins to fall in earnest. The city turns from black to white, from ruin to memory. The streets are quiet but not peaceful. You can hear the creak of trees snapping under frost, the whimper of horses that no one has the strength to comfort. The men tear pages from books to line their boots. You wrap your feet in rags, grateful for any barrier between you and the creeping cold. You think about Paris again, warm hands, lamplight, rain that didn't bite. The memory hurts more than the frost. Henri tries to keep spirits up. He jokes that if they stay long enough, they'll become locals. "Maybe I'll open a tavern," he says. "Call it Le Glacon Heureux, the happy ice cube." You chuckle. And serve what? Hot air and sarcasm, it's in good supply. You both laugh, coughing through the smoke of burning furniture. But humour is thin gruel. The horses are dying now, one by one. Their bodies freeze where they fall. Statues under the snow. Men strip them for leather, for food, for warmth. You look away, not because it's wrong, but because it's human. Historians still debate how many men died here without battle, how much was lost to weather, hunger, silence. But numbers can't measure what it does to you. Watching the strongest men you know stare blankly at fires that no longer heat them. The Emperor still waits, still believes a letter will come. You can almost admire it, the audacity of hope sharpened to madness. One night, You and Henri take watch together on the Kremlin wall. The city below is a white wasteland, and the sky flickers with aurora, faint and green. It's the kind of beauty that doesn't care who sees it. Henri nudges you. "Look," he whispers. "Even the sky is mocking us. It's dancing." You smile. Maybe it's celebrating we made it this far. Far from what? You don't answer. You just watch the light shimmer like a curtain being drawn between worlds. The next morning, the Emperor gives 2 new orders. Finally, movement. Scouts are to ride out, provisions gathered. The men are to prepare to leave. You should feel relief. You should feel anything. But mostly, you feel tired in a way that's beyond sleep. Moscow lies behind you like a burnt page. Ahead is snow and silence, and regret still wrapped in the Emperor's conviction. As you march out of the city, you glance back one last time. The domes are pale against the dawn, ghostly outlines of beauty refusing to die completely. Henri salutes the skyline. "Farewell, madame," he says. "Think she'll miss us?" you ask. He shrugs. "She'll miss her spoons?" You laugh, and it echoes strangely in the frozen air like something that shouldn't exist anymore. And as the city fades into the white distance, you realise that the silence isn't empty after all. It's waiting, like the word on the wall, "Shdi," wait. The frost deepens, the air thickens, the march begins again. You don't remember the exact moment when the frost stopped being decoration and became the law. One day it was just there, brushing your boots, a glittering nuisance that bit only in jest. The next, it was in everything, your breath, your sleeves, the edges of thought. The whole world had gone brittle, a porcelain map that cracked under every footstep. You wake to see your blanket rimmed with white lace. Your breath makes clouds. The candle you kept by your side has frozen mid-drip. The wax paused like it was caught mid-thought. You stretch your fingers and they complain in pops. Henri is already up, breaking ice off a barrel to scoop water that's more solid than liquid. "Breakfast," he says. He holds up a piece of horse meat, hard as iron, grey as regret. Chef recommends chewing with care. You smirk. "What's the sauce?" He grins weakly. "Frostbite." "Mostly." You both laugh, the sound small and sharp like glass tapping glass. Napoleon's orders came at dawn. The army will move out soon. Soon means anything between a day and a lifetime, but even false movement feels better than stillness. Men begin to gather what's left. Guns, packs, wheels, the occasional hope. Horses stand motionless, their sides heaving, eyes dull. The city behind you, Moscow, the dream, the ashtray of ambition, stares without blinking. Historians still debate whether Napoleon's hesitation cost him the empire. Some say he lingered too long, waiting for the Tsar to blink. Others argue that it was fate that waited for him instead. You, meanwhile, just try to keep your toes. The first leg of the retreat begins like a sigh. The Grande Armée, once a river of noise and brass, now trickles through the gates in silence. The drums don't beat, there's no need. Everyone knows the rhythm. Step, breathe, curse, repeat. The sound of snow crunching under thousands of boots is like parchment tearing endlessly. You shuffle forward. The frost creaks underfoot like it's laughing. The air feels heavier, as though the sky is pressing closer to hear your thoughts. By midday, you can't feel your nose. Someone tells you that if it turns white, it's dying. You look around and realise half the army's noses are already ghosts. Henri tugs his scarf tighter. You ever think frost looks pretty? Only if it's not eating you alive. He chuckles through chattering teeth. Then call me an art critic. The columns stretch endlessly ahead, a living grey ribbon unravelling across the whitened land. Cannon wheels squeal. Horses collapse mid-step. Frozen statues before they hit the ground. You stop looking at faces. Everyone looks carved now. That night, you find shelter in a barn that smells of hay and despair. The roof leaks in perfect rhythm. You and Henri huddle together, sharing what warmth 2 half-frozen men can make. Somewhere in the dark, someone begins humming. A lullaby, maybe. Though the melody stumbles, you recognise it as the same tune that drifted through Borodino's smoke. You whisper, "That song's following us," Henri replies. "Maybe it's trying to find the ending." You both fall asleep before the last note. Morning brings wind. Not the polite kind that stings your cheeks, but the full-throated howl that shoves you sideways and gnaws through wool. The banners, What few remain snap like paper. Napoleon rides past at one point, wrapped in his grey coat, his horse's mane whipped into white streamers. He doesn't speak, he doesn't need to. Just being there makes men straighten. Even if it's only to fall a little slower later, the snow keeps deepening. Wagons tip over, wheels jammed in ruts that vanish instantly under powder. The road is a rumour beneath your feet. Somewhere near Moshaïsk, you stop for a night in what used to be a village. The houses are black shells. One still has a stove intact, and you help light it with scraps of broken furniture. The flame feels obscene in its luxury. Crowd around, palms out, eyes wide, as if warmth is a new religion and the stove is its altar. Someone tries to cook soup, water, a handful of oats, and the memory of beef. The smell is heavenly. You take a sip, feel heat trickle into your throat, and almost cry. Henri declares it the finest meal east of Paris, then promptly burns his tongue and blames Napoleon. The joke spreads. Blame Napoleon becomes the day's favourite pastime. A man loses his glove. Blame Napoleon. Another slips on ice. Napoleon again. A horse farts and startles a sentry. Clearly imperial policy. Laughter ripples through the camp like a warm draught, fragile but real. You cling to it. Historians still debate how discipline held this long, how 600,000 men could dissolve into misery and still call themselves an army. The truth, as if you ask yourself, is stubbornness. The same quality that drove you across the Niemen now drives you backward through hell. Pride makes excellent kindling if you burn it slow. On the third day of the retreat, the frost begins to sing. It's a sound you can't quite describe, somewhere between cracking wood and whispering silk. The ice shifts under your boots like it's alive. You realise it's the river. The French engineers curse and hammer, trying to rebuild bridges that the thaw once ruined and the freeze now mocks. Men line up to cross. The ice groans, cracks, holds. The sound echoes down the valley like laughter again, cruel and ancient. You're halfway across when you hear a splash behind you. You turn in time to see a wagon tip, horses flailing, their bodies plunging through black water that swallows light. The driver doesn't even scream. He just vanishes. For a second, no one moves. Then the sergeant shouts, and everyone hurries forward, pretending the hole in the ice doesn't exist. You don't look back. You can't afford to. That night, you and Henri find shelter behind a ruined wall. The wind sneaks through the cracks anyway. You try to warm your hands over a candle, but the flame is smaller than your hope. Henri stares at it. You think he knows. Who? The Emperor. How bad it is. You think for a long moment. I think he knows. He just doesn't believe it. Henri nods. That's one way to stay warm. You smile faintly. Leaf burn slow. He laughs quietly. Then we'll be fine. You sleep, if it can be called that, and dream of spring, green leaves, soft ground, Parisian bread that doesn't crumble like chalk. You wake to find your eyelashes frozen together. The days blend, the frost deepens, the sky lowers, and the line of men thins. You stop counting steps, start counting breaths, one in, one out. That's your rhythm now. Occasionally, you pass through a town still standing. The locals watch you from windows, neither pitying nor hostile. Just tired of history using their streets. In one village, a child waves. You wave back. The boy smiles, then disappears into the doorway. You keep that image like a secret. Napoleon rides ahead again. You see him on a ridge, small against the endless snow, his horse pawing the frozen earth. Someone says he still carries maps, still talks about logistics, still plans as if plans can survive frost. You admire him for that. You pity him too. The food runs out for real this time. You chew leather, bark, anything that remembers flavour. Henri jokes that you've reached the forest cuisine chapter of the trip. You tell him to save room for dessert, a snowflake on a stick. He laughs. But his teeth chatter so hard it sounds like applause. One evening, as you walk, you see something glittering half buried in snow. You bend down. It's a brass candlestick. Ornate, heavy, absurdly out of place. You hold it up and grin. Found our luxury item. Henri bows. Perfect. We'll eat into style tonight. You carry it the rest of the day. Not because it's useful, but because it's proof that beauty can survive even stupidity. By the 10th night, the frost no longer bites. It simply lives inside you. You stop feeling pain in your feet, which should scare you, but doesn't. You and Henri share silence like an old song you've forgotten the words to. Historians still debate whether the retreat began too late or ended too early. You debate whether your fingers are still attached. You both have a point. At dusk, the sky blushes pink, the only colour left in the world. You stare at it and think it looks almost gentle, as if the world is apologising. Henri nudges you. Pretty, isn't it? You nod. Yeah, feels like a lie, though. Most pretty things do, he says. You laugh softly. Then you keep walking. Ahead of you, the frost waits for its cue to become snow again. Behind you, Moscow fades fully into myth. And somewhere between the two, you begin to understand what regret sounds like. The soft, endless crunch of boots on frozen ground. The frost has learned your name. It calls you by it each morning when you wake. A polite whisper against your ears. Still here? It doesn't sound cruel, it sounds curious, like a host surprised to see you lingering at a party that ended long ago. You rise, slow and clumsy, because sleep in this cold isn't sleep, it's negotiation. Your limbs feel rented, your breath stiff. Henri lies beside you, his face pale as the snow he dreams under. He opens one eye and says, "Did I die? I can't tell the difference anymore." You grin, or try to. "Not yet, you still owe me breakfast." He groans, "Tell the frost I'm unavailable." You stand, stamping your boots until you remember there's no point. The warmth will leave you faster than you can make it. Around you, the camp stirs, 100 silhouettes wrapped in rags that used to be uniforms. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and something metallic that isn't quite blood and isn't quite rust. Today's orders are the same as every day's orders. Move, always west, always away. Napoleon says the army will regroup, that the road to Smolensk will lead back to safety. Nobody says it aloud, but everyone knows safety is just a polite word for fewer bodies. You start walking. The snow is deeper now, up to your calves, soft in the morning and cruel by afternoon. Each step is a conversation with exhaustion. The sun rises reluctantly, like it's ashamed to be seen. Historians still debate why Napoleon waited so long to leave Moscow, why he lingered, while the frost gathered soldiers for its own army. Some say he hoped to salvage diplomacy, others that he couldn't bear to call defeat by its name. But you, trudging through the white paint, think maybe he just didn't know how to stop believing in himself. When a man has been the centre of the world, it's hard to admit the world has moved on. By noon, the wind returns, it doesn't blow, it punches, grabs at your cloak and your hat, your sanity. The snow dances sideways, 1,000 tiny knives performing a ballet no one wants to watch. The horizon disappears, and suddenly it's like marching inside a cloud made of sandpaper. Henri leans close. If we ever see Paris again, I'm buying the first person I see a sandwich. Why not a whole meal? Because I'll probably die halfway through. You both laugh, and the sound freezes mid-air. The road narrows between forests that sigh under their own weight. Trees creak like bones shifting in a coffin. You spot a fox once. Thin, silent, tail low. It looks at you, blinks, and trots away. Even the wildlife doesn't want your company. When the column halts for rest, thus, you drop where you stand. The ground is so cold it feels hot. You tear off your gloves just to make sure your fingers still exist. They do, but only barely. Henri wraps his scarf tighter around his neck, muttering that frostbite is just the body's way of quitting its job without notice. That night, a few men start a fire using the remains of a wagon wheel. The flames crackle weakly. Fighting the wind, you sit close, hands out, letting the heat lick your palms. Someone passes a tin cup of something, brandy maybe, or melted snow pretending to be. You drink anyway. The firelight makes everyone look human again for a little while. Cheeks glow, eyes shine, and even the misery softens into something like camaraderie. You almost forget where you are until a horse collapses nearby. Its breath steaming once, twice, then gone. The silence that follows is heavy as stone. Henri stares at it for a long moment, then says, "Maybe we should give it a medal." "For what?" "For trying." You nod. "We all deserve one." Then he grins faintly. "Let's make them out of icicles. Cheap and elegant." The next morning, you wake to shouting. Someone's found food, or what passes for it. A handful of frozen turnips and a sack of oats from an abandoned wagon. The men crowd like wolves, but discipline still exists in flickers. The officer divides the spoils with a blunt knife. You get a single turnip. It's cold, fibrous, tastes like disappointment, but you chew it slowly, pretending it's roast chicken. A few miles later, you pass what used to be a farmhouse. The roof is gone, but the walls still stand, and inside, there's a piano. Yes, a real piano. Half buried in snow, one leg snapped. Someone presses a key. It makes a dull, hollow sound. Another man presses another. Soon the air fills with broken music, like a lullaby sung by ghosts. You can't help it, you start humming along. Henri looks at you sideways. If this is heaven, it needs tuning. Maybe it's hell, you say. And they just ran out of fire. He laughs softly, the sound brittle but alive. Historians still debate what happened to morale during the retreat. Some claim the men lost faith in Napoleon. Others insist they worshipped him even more. Desperate for someone to make sense of the suffering. But from where you stand, faith feels less like worship and more like stubborn gravity. You believe not because it's easy, but because you've forgotten how to star. By the 4th week, the snow has eaten colour entirely. The world is white and grey and human red where it shouldn't be. You pass abandoned cannons, frozen mid-recoil, horses turn to statues, men sitting under trees who look asleep but aren't. You stop counting them. Counting makes it too real. One day, Napoleon rides by again, slower this time. His coat is the same, but his eyes are smaller, tighter. You notice frost clinging to his hat. He doesn't shake it off. It's as if even the Emperor has accepted the frost as part of the uniform. Henri mutters. He looks tired. He's carrying the world, you answer. Then maybe he should drop it, Henri says, but not unkindly. That night, you camp near a river. The ice hums under the stars. You and Henri share a scrap of horsehide boiled in snow water, calling it soufflé à la catastrophe. You both laugh until you cough. It feels good. It feels almost normal. When the laughter fades, you stare at the fire, small and fragile. Henri looks at you. You think anyone will remember this? You think of the empty cities, the burned bread, the frost writing its initials across the empire. You think of the spoon drummer, the cucumber field, the cat that outlived Moscow. You think of the emperor, pacing like a ghost in a palace of ashes. Yeah, you say quietly, but not the way we want them to. The days get shorter. Or maybe you just stop noticing the difference between light and dark. The army shrinks, dissolving at the edges. What began as 600,000 has become a rumour with boots. Once, during a storm, you lose sight of Henri. Panic hits like a shot. You call his name, a voice muffled by snow. When you finally find him, he's sitting under a broken wagon, eyes glazed. You shake him, and he blinks back to life. Was just resting, he says weakly. Rest later. Define later. You drag him up anyway. You don't let go of his arm for the next hour. That night, he thanks you by handing you half a biscuit he has been saving since Moscow. It's rock hard, stale, and divine. You take a bite and grin, luxury dining. Le Glacon Heureux expands its menu, he says. The laughter comes again, soft and sincere. For a moment, it almost sounds like the world forgiving you. But the frost doesn't forgive. It just waits, always polite, always patient. When you close your eyes that night, you dream of heat, not warmth, but true, burning summer. Fields, golden and endless. Water cold enough to shock but not kill. You wake shivering, breath fogging the air. Henri's asleep beside you, hand still clutching his musket like a child's toy. You stare at him for a long moment, and for the first time you realise he's thinner than you remember. The frost has been carving him too. Outside, the wind howls across the snow, dragging the sound of distant cannon fire. Faint, like thunder behind glass. The war isn't over. It's just far away, waiting for you to catch up. You roll over, pull your coat tighter, and whisper to yourself, tomorrow will be warmer. It's a lie, but it's a beautiful one. And that's enough. The day the retreat truly begins, it doesn't feel like an order. It feels like surrender, pretending to be a plan. You wake before dawn, half frozen, and hear the word whispered down the line. West. The syllable feels heavy, like it's been stored too long in someone's pocket. West. Back toward France, toward everything you left behind in summer, when the world was still green and full of lies that sounded like promises. You start moving before your body is ready. The snow crunches underfoot like thin glass. The horizon glows pale blue, cold and infinite. Behind you, Moscow is just a smear of smoke against the distance. Ahead lies the road, long, white, merciless. Henri limps beside you, his scarf stiff with frost. "Well," he mutters, "at least we're not lost." You glance at him. "Aren't we?" He laughs, the sound thin but real. Philosophically, sure, geographically, not yet. You both know that by sunset, half the men will be lost anyway. Stragglers swallowed by drifts, deserters turned into snow statues. The frost doesn't kill fast, it kills politely, giving you time to understand. The column moves like a wounded animal. Cannon wheels drag deep ruts through the snow. The horses stumble, ribs showing like xylophone keys. Every few hundred steps, one drops and doesn't get up. Nobody stops anymore. You've learnt the futility of sympathy. It freezes faster than water. Historians still debate how many men died not from battle, but from the journey itself, from cold, hunger, and the heavy arithmetic of distance. They argue about logistics, supply chains, command failures. You know the truth is simpler. People die because walking hurts more than stopping. You trudge on, the wind picks up, blowing fine powder into your eyes. The world disappears into white noise. Around midday, a wagon breaks through the ice of a shallow river. The driver's scream is short, cut off by the slap of water. The horses thrash, their breath steaming like desperate prayers. You and Henri help pull one free, its hide frozen stiff. When it stands, trembling, it looks at you with wide, bewildered eyes, as if asking what god you thought this was for. Henri pats its neck. "Same to you, friend," he whispers. You move on. That night, the camp is a series of dim fires. Each surrounded by shadows too tired to care, you huddle near one, holding out your hands, feeling the warmth more as memory than sensation. "Remember Paris?" Henri asks. You nod. The river, the bridges, the way the lights hit the windows. He smiles faintly. And bread that didn't break teeth. "Ah, bread," you sigh dramatically. "A myth told to children." Henri chuckles. Historians still debate whether it existed. You both laugh, a little too loudly, a little too long. The men around you glance over, confused by the sound of joy in this place. Later, when the fire dies, you dream of that bread, soft, hot, dusted with flour. You tear it in half and it smells like forgiveness. You wake up chewing on air. Morning. The frost has stiffened the world again. The snow under your boots squeaks like dry chalk. You notice your shadow is thinner, weaker, like even light is tired of following you. Napoleon rides at the front, or so they say. You never see him up close anymore. He's become rumour again somewhere ahead, moving faster than thought, the Emperor of Silence, wrapped in grey. A courier gallops past, his horse foaming. He shouts something you can't hear. The sound is torn away by the wind. Whatever message he carries, you already know it. Keep going. You pass the ruins of a village, burned again, like all the others. A dog barks once and vanishes into the snow. The smell of smoke lingers, thin and bitter. You stop long enough to steal a handful of charcoal from the ashes. You rub it on your cheeks and nose, an old trick from veterans. The dark smudges keep the frost from biting too deep. It works, a little. You look like a soldier painted for war against winter itself. Henri watches you, amused. Nice touch, very fashionable. You shrug. "If I die, at least I'll look like I meant to." "Paris will be so jealous," he says, and you laugh. For the first time in days, your laughter doesn't feel like rebellion, it feels like resistance. By afternoon, the snow turns to sleet. The sky weeps tiny knives. The road becomes a river of slush. Cannon wheels stick, men slip, swearing replaces marching songs. The army that once thundered now whimpers. At one point, you pass a man standing perfectly still in the snow, musket in hand, eyes closed. You think he's praying until you realise he's frozen upright. You salute him anyway. The sun sets too soon, the light draining from the world like spilled ink. You camp in an open field. There are no trees left to burn. Someone tears pages from an officer's notebook and sets them alight. The flames lick upward, weak but eager. You hold your hands over them, the warmth brief as a breath. "Imagine," Henri says softly, "that these are the Emperor's plans." You grin, then at least something's burning properly. The next morning, a rumour spreads like warmth. Food ahead, a village with stores, untouched. The men quicken their pace, eyes bright for the first time in weeks. You follow the sound of shouting, the smell of something real, smoke, bread, life. But when you arrive, it's another ghost town. The stores are empty, the wells frozen solid. The only thing left is a wooden sign, half buried in snow where its letters eaten by frost. Someone kicks it down in fury. Henri sighs. Well, at least it wasn't false advertising. You laugh, then stop, because laughing uses too much air. Historians still debate whether Napoleon's maps lied, whether the supply lines collapsed by misfortune or design. You suspect it doesn't matter. The only truth that counts is the one under your feet, snow, ice, and the endless rhythm of regret. By now, the frost has started to talk back. You hear it in your joints, your bones, the creak of every motion. It has a voice now, a whisper that says, "You should have turned around sooner." You ignore it. What else can you do? That night, as you huddle against a dead horse for warmth, Henri mutters, "Do you ever think he'll admit it?" Who? The Emperor. That it was too far. You stare at the fire's dying glow. He might, but not out loud. Then what are we? You think for a moment. The echo. He nods, satisfied. Good. I'd hate to be just footprints. You fall asleep beside him, the wind whistling like a lullaby played on broken glass. The next day, the horizon darkens, not with storm, but with movement. The Russians are there again. Somewhere unseen, but close enough for rumour to have a scent. You can feel it in the way officers start speaking in shorter sentences, in the way men check their muskets without being told. Still, the order is the same. Keep marching. The frost thickens its grip. The wind grows teeth. You watch a man's ear snap off when he removes his hat. He doesn't even notice until someone tells him. He laughs, horrified, and pockets it like a souvenir. By nightfall, you've stopped feeling your feet. It's almost a relief. The camp is smaller now, less a camp, more a congregation of ghosts pretending they still have bodies. You sit beside Henri, share the last biscuit, and pretend it's Sunday dinner. "To Paris," he says, raising the crumb. "To Paris," you echo. You eat, you breathe, you survive the night, somehow. When morning comes, it's silent again. So silent you can hear the frost whisper still here. And you are, but you're not sure for how much longer. Snow decides it's tired of being scenery. Overnight it learns your habits, then outruns them. What used to fall politely now moves with purpose, and the road that once performed the courtesy of showing up under your boots stops answering its name. You wake to drifts where paths used to be. Dunes of white that migrate with the wind like they belong to a different continent. You tie a bit of rag around your face and tell your lungs to be grateful for the ration of air you're offering them. They file a complaint anyway. You're west of Smolensk now, past the city that promised bread and handed you dust. The magazines were supposed to save you. Instead, you found splinters and a rumour of flour the wind had already eaten. The army has tightened, thinned, frayed, then tightened again around whatever strength remains. The snow marches faster than you do. It covers the footprints you lay down even as your heel is lifting. Sometimes you look back to check you exist and there's nothing there, just a smooth page that refuses your signature. Henri walks beside you, scarf iced into a plank. His eyelashes have become a tiny forest of glass. "On the bright side," he says through cloth, "I think my nose has stopped complaining." "That's because it resigned," you answer. "No farewell party." He laughs, and you both wince. Laughter's expensive in this weather. The column folds and unfolds around broken wagons and fallen horses. You've stopped flinching at the thuds. They sound like punctuation now, hard stops in a sentence that's grown too long. A drummer passes using the spoon again. Dented, heroic, keeping a heartbeat for the few who can still hear it. You lift two numb fingers in salute. He grins, the expression cracking the ice at the corners of his mouth. When the wind drops for a breath, sound returns like a remembered city, the squeal of axles, the sotto voce cursing of men trying to light damp tinder, the polite cough of an officer pretending he still commands anything but silence. You watch a sergeant scold the weather itself for poor discipline. "You will blow from the rear like a civilized tailwind," he says to the sky, "or I will put you on report," or the sky, to its credit, considers the order for exactly 1 second before slapping everyone sideways. Historians still debate how low the temperature really fell, whether the numbers in journals were the poetry of suffering or the record of a scale the mercury itself wanted to abandon. You don't own a thermometer. The only scale that matters is how long it takes to feel your toes again after a fire. And lately the answer is, they are not attending. By mid-morning the snow outruns vision. A white wall the size of Russia steps in front of you and asks for a password you don't have. The shapes around you flatten into silhouettes. and even the familiar churn of men and animals becomes cartoonish. Black cutouts moving through milk. You follow the next pack of legs because that's what you've been trained to do, and because thinking in such weather is a hobby for spring. Then cannon, not the parade thunder of Borodino, but sharp, mean barks. Someone's there ahead of you, and they have decided you don't get to pass without paying. The word flows back along the column, slurred by scarves. Krasnoy. You've never heard the name before. You will never forget it again. The Russians wait in the snow haze like patient creditors. Kutuzov's main body has drifted parallel, and out on your flanks partisan bands nip at stragglers the way foxes test fence lines. Between the drifts and the guns, the road becomes an argument with no polite exit. You crouch behind a sled loaded with nothing, because nothing is taller than you are, and load your musket with fingers that behave like other people's. The air tastes of iron again. You hadn't noticed how much you missed that. Battle's tang. The way it gives cold a purpose other than cruelty. You fire when the line fires. You stand when the line stands. And for a shimmering minute the world is simple. The enemy is there. The road is here. And your body is the bridge between the two. A courier tumbles past, shouting that 3 Corps is cut apart, that Davout is fighting with his usual machine patience, that the Guard is a dark island in a white sea. Another voice insists the Emperor will break through. Another says the Emperor is already gone. He moved yesterday. He is smoke on the horizon. He is the rumour that refuses to freeze. You don't see Napoleon. You do see Marshall's plumes, dim comets in the storm, and once, like a trick of light, you glimpse Ney, beard white with rime, eyes hot, moving through the chaos as if anger alone can warm a man. The story will be told 1,000 ways later, how he stayed at the rear, how he gathered scraps of units into a fist, how he refused to be measured by the speed of snow. Historians still debate whether his escape at Krasnoy was an act of genius, a series of Russian mistakes, or proof that stubbornness sometimes knocks holes in fate. You settle for the version that lets you keep walking. Because you do keep walking, orders push you west. Sidesteps snake across fields that used to be something else in summer. Wheat, laughter, the slow conversations of insects. Now they are white plates, and you are the crumbs the wind hasn't cleared. The Russians press, pull back, press again, offering 1,000 small deaths instead of one decisive one. The sound of their guns moves like a cold shadow just behind your shoulder. At a hollow you find a woodcutter's cache, short billets of birch buried under a drift. Men descend as if into a miracle. Someone produces a hatchet with a handle wrapped in frozen rags, and the first spark falls in love with the second. Flames! The word runs like gossip, and for a radiant 3 minutes you're rich. You hold your palms over the newborn fire and promise to live forever. Then a gust folds the blaze into smoke, and forever returns to its original scale. Le Glacon Heureux reopens, Henri announces, theatrically, as he holds a strip of leather near the heat. Tonight's special, stew of saddle with a bouquet of desperation. You nod solemnly. And for dessert, I present an exclusive snow on a stick. He laughs so hard he nearly drops the leather, then bites it, then chews like a man negotiating with an oak door. Crunchy, he says. A grenadier shows you a trick with a cartridge. He pours a bit of powder onto a rag and lights it, letting the flash kiss his fingers before he cups it over a twig bundle. It's theatrical, unsafe, and it works. Quirky fact for the evening. Powder burns hot and fast enough to frighten the frost into clapping. You call the trick Saint Boulanger's candle, because in another universe it would toast bread. Afternoon declines the invitation to exist. The sky fades from pewter to the colour of old ice, and the air begins to fill with the powdery snow that makes sound disappear entirely. Fighting stutters along the road, volleys that cough and vanish, cavalry silhouettes that loom like myths, then withdraw, as if embarrassed to be seen in this weather. You move when the mass moves, you kneel when it kneels, and 5 minutes last for a week. A priest appears with a brass cross blackened by smoke. He doesn't preach, he just walks the line. And men reach out gloved hands to touch metal that used to be warm in other churches. You touch it, and for one heartbeat your fingers remember being human. Toward evening, the Russians relax the pressure. No one tells you why. Maybe Kutuzov imagines you already dead. Maybe he knows the snow will do neater work than his guns. Maybe his scouts have brought news from the north, where another river has begun rehearsing its winter voice. You don't ask. When a trapdoor opens under your feet and you land on a ledge instead of spikes, you climb. You camp in a shallow cut the wind misses by inches. Everyone pretends it's a room. Men back themselves against dirt the colour of night. You and Henri share the tiny luxury of dry twigs and a pane of glass you scavenge from a wagon, propped in front of a flame. It reflects warmth, as if generosity were a trick you could teach light. You hold out your hands to the fiction and find it's enough to move pain 2 inches farther away. Do you remember the white cat, Henri asks out of the dark? From Moscow? From everywhere, he says. I think it's following us. It will open an inn in Paris before we do. You snort, spoons complimentary. He hums the old tune, the one that followed you from summer into guns and out again. The melody has lost words but found weather. You fall asleep with it stitched into your ribs. Morning opens like a bruise. Purple clouds, tender light. The column rises, shakes out, discovers it is smaller again. You don't say the names of the men who are missing. Saying names in winter is like tossing coins into a frozen fountain. They bounce and skitter and are not granted. A horse you've been shadowing for days finally declines to continue. The driver, who has refused to abandon it 3 times longer than a sensible man would, strokes the animal's neck and whispers, "Merci." Then he takes the harness and puts it over his own shoulders. You look away for the courtesy of it, and then, because courtesy seems outdated, you step in and help him pull. The sled moves 2 inches. 2 inches count. When the road kinks north, you glimpse, impossibly, a row of cabbages under snow. Half rotten, half perfect. In a garden the frost forgot to erase. A dozen men fall to their knees as if at a shrine. Pry the heads free and hold them up like trophies. The smell is green and prehistoric. You slice one with your bayonet and eat it raw, crunchy, cold, exquisite. Moscow haute cuisine, Henri intones, and for 30 seconds history is generous. By midday, Krasnoy is a rumour behind you, a bruise behind the eyes. The fight didn't finish you. It tried to erase your calendar instead. The rearguard still trades shots, nay stubborn in the role of last man out of a burning theatre, holding the door for a crowd that will never say thank you because the etiquette of survival has no chalkboard. Whether he slips through a ravine or punches a hole through thin ice or simply walks out the back while the snow distracts the audience depends on which campfire you listen to. You choose the story that puts a little heat in your chest. The wind returns with news, rivers ahead, names you have barely heard, Vop, then father, the Berezina, the syllables that feel like teeth. The engineers talk in equations, the quartermasters in laments, the marshals in lines and arrows they draw with gloved fingers on a saddlecloth because the snow eats maps just to feel superior. You cross a minor stream on ice that sings like a wine glass. Men move one at a time with the solemnity of saints climbing a ladder. In the middle, someone slips. You catch his collar and he gasps a thank you that fogs your face. When you reach the far bank, he hands you a coin, a copper with a hole through it, worn smooth by years of prayers. For luck, he says, or for sewing to your coat. You sew it on that night with thread from a shirt cuff. The coin lies over your heart like a promise that wants to be a fact. That night the sky clears and the stars lean close, cold as pins. You and Henri make a shelter by tipping a sled against a drift and crawling under. The candle guttering between you makes a theatre of your faces. "Tell me a story," he says. "About what?" "About the day after we get home." You smile, the muscles protest, then accept the assignment. "We sleep until noon, we wake to bread, real bread, not a rumour. We go out and buy oranges, the colour of new brass, and a fish that still smells like the sea. We sit by the river even if the wind is bad because it's Paris and the wind has manners there. And when a white cat walks by, we salute it." Henri nods, eyes shining in the candle's wobble. "And the inn?" "Le Glacon Heureux," you say. "We keep the name to scare summer away. We serve soup with 2 spoons, one for eating, one for music." He laughs softly, and the sound adds half a degree to the air. "Historians will debate whether the soup existed," he murmurs as his eyes drift shut. The morning forgets its promise and arrives anyway. You crawl out and find the world has moved 2 feet closer to your nose. The snow is higher, the sky lower, the road narrower. Somewhere behind you a gun fires a ceremonial single shot, the last piece of ammunition in a battery that refuses to admit the word empty. The echo steps politely from tree to tree until it fades. At a village crossroads a sign tilts. The names on it are splayed in Cyrillic, the letters like frost crystals. A local points with his chin and says a word you now understand in any language, Berezina. He does not smile, you do not either, but your heart does the thing it does when a destination is real, even a terrible one. It steadies to a smaller, meaner rhythm built for getting there. Snow scoops the land into bowls, and inside one you find a miracle, a stack of fence palings under drift, dry enough to burn. Men form a ring so quickly it looks like choreography. The fire you build has the posture of a general. You show your hands to it like a petitioner. Heat is not warmth, you learn the difference, the same way glory is not survival, but it bends you back toward yourself. Look, Henri says, pointing. You turn and see it. A single intact window in a blackened cottage catching the firelight and painting it on the snow. For a second, the ground looks like a ballroom floor with chandeliers. You and Henri bow to each other on impulse. Two broken men in rags, curtsying to air, laughing until you cough. Drummer taps along with the spoon and you waltz 3 steps. Then give up because your knees belong to January and he didn't RSVP. You sit shaking with stupid happiness. If the cat were here, you say, she'd charge admission. 2 turnips a ticket, Henri agrees. No refunds for weather. Someone shares a pebble of salt as if it were a diamond. Someone else produces a paper twist of tea leaves rescued from a dead market. The pot boils once, twice, and the tea is the colour of hope that has learned to be modest. You sip. You close your eyes. You allow the world to be kind for 8 seconds. Then the wind changes, just a nudge, and you smell pine smoke from the east. Russian columns again, or villagers making beer, or the earth complaining. You stamp the embers because you have learned to read omens in gusts. The road lifts itself like a tired scarf, and you tuck yourself under it with the rest, west. Always that short, wide word your mouth can still shape. As you shoulder your pack, the copper coin taps your ribs and you remember something that helps more than the bread. People have done impossible distances before. They were not famous. They did not write their temperatures in journals. They just kept going because the alternative was to stop. The snow keeps its lead, but you find you don't mind the race anymore. The snow can win, you only need to finish. When the afternoon dwindles, and the map says very quietly that tomorrow you will see the river that writes stories on armies, you tell yourself a truth that is not a lie. You are still here. The frost has learned your name. Yes, but so has the road. It says it back to you now and then, a soft syllable under the crunch. You answer out loud to prove you still have a voice. Present, Henri glances over, eyes amused. Hunting roll again? Just letting the snow know. You tell him, who it failed to erase. He nods, content, and for once he doesn't make a joke. You take that as a benediction. Night falls with its usual lack of imagination. You crawl under the sled again, the candle's wick catching like a tiny star learning words. Before you sleep, you listen. No drums, no bells, just the faint music of a river rehearsing somewhere in the dark. It sounds confident. It sounds cold. It sounds like a test that might also be a bridge. Tomorrow will explain itself with ice and planks and courage. Tonight you give your bones the only order they still obey. Rest. The snow can sprint as much as it wants. You will walk. You hear it before you see it. The low, steady mutter of moving water. A sound so honest it feels like scolding. The snow has been narrating your life for weeks, soft and treacherous. But the Berezina speaks in a different register. It tells you the test is here. It says, without drama, that to go home you must cross something that wants you more than you want yourself. The river lies ahead like a bruise across the land. Wide, dark, rimmed with ice that keeps changing its mind. Patches have frozen hard, other parts are thin. Treacherous as a rumour. Wind slides over it with a gambler's confidence. Somewhere downstream, a floe turns, catches on a snag, and shivers apart. You taste damp iron and old wood in the air. The order comes down, halt, dig in, wait for the engineers. Wait, you think, rolling the word around in your mouth. You've been practicing it since Moscow's D scratched on a wall. The horizon answering in silence. But now waiting feels like standing on a doorstep while the staircase burns. Snow falls in powder that doesn't bother to hide its arrogance. The officers move from knot to knot of men, voices clipped, pointing with gloves that have run out of fingers. A sentry gestures to the far bank, where shapes move behind the trees. Russians, many of them, careful, patient. You hear new names tossed into the wind. Chichagov to the south, Wittgenstein to the north, Kutuzov behind like an old wolf with a full understanding of the weather. You are a thread being pulled between many hands. Henri leans close, scarf iced into a sculpture. "So," he whispers, "do we swim? In this?" You gesture at the river that looks like it eats swimmers for breakfast and then asks for the lunch menu. He nods soberly. Right. We'll order takeout." You have smiled despite the ache that has set up residence in your bones. Humour is a small fire. You hold your hands to it whenever you can. Then the engineers arrive, not the glamorous sort. No plumes, no brass. Just men with tools and stubbornness welded into their spines. Their commander speaks little, but his name passes between the ranks like a match drawn along a fence. Eblé. You will say it for years in a tone you used to reserve for saints and blacksmiths. He and his pontonniers set their chins against the cold and make announcements with axes. The plan, as the plan sees itself, build bridges at Studianka, north of Borisov, where the river narrows, where the ice might cooperate and the banks are low. The plan, as the frost intends it, break hammers, freeze ropes, swallow men, crack planks, mock courage. The engineers accept both versions and get to work anyway. You watch them move down the bank with a seriousness that commands superstition. They carry trestles, beams, stakes, and faces that understand bargaining with water. Some wade in without waiting. The first splash rips a gasp from every throat on shore. They're in up to their knees, then their waists, then their chests, men turning blue as they hammer posts into a floor they cannot see. One slips, vanishes. He surfaces 10 feet downstream, coughs river, and keeps going. Another wraps a length of rope around his torso and grins through teeth that have forgotten about blood flow. Quirky fact for your private museum, a veteran swears by a winter armour trick. Layers of straw under a shirt, tucked tight as a secret. He demonstrates by tying handfuls around his torso before stepping into the current. The straw floats him just enough that the others laugh. And then the current decides on a joke of its own and he vanishes under with a yelp. He pops back up sputtering, looking like a haystack that lost an argument, and salutes the shore. Everyone cheers because cheering is one of the few luxuries left. Closer to dawn, the first trestle rises, roar against the sky. Hammers beat a rhythm that almost sounds like hope. The pontonniers work by rote, drive, lash, brace, curse, repeat, learning the river's breath the way a singer learns a partner's tempo. When a flow slams the frame, the whole construction shudders like a surprised horse and then settles again. Stubborn. "Saint Boulanger's candle!" someone cries, and the powder trick you learned days ago flares under a clump of soaked twigs. Flames lick out and the bank redraws itself in colours you haven't seen for weeks. Orange, gold, human. The drummer appears as if summoned, spoon still in service, tapping a beat that holds the line together while the engineers stitch a road out of winter. Historians still debate whether Napoleon deceived Chichagov with feints, whether the move toward Borisov was a clean misdirection or a lucky confusion, whether Eblé's bridges were inevitable or miraculous. There's also an argument about how many men could have made it without the pontonniers burning their own gear to keep the axes flexible. You don't join the debate. You watch a man in water up to his neck pound a steak and decide that argument is the summer sport. Morning opens like a lid, grey and cautious. Word ripples through the ranks. The first bridge is ready for infantry, the second being fastened for wagons and guns. You and Henri shoulder your packs and step forward because that's the script. The crowd presses in, tightening into a mass with one intention: up, across, down. Officers shout order numbers until the numbers themselves sound dehydrated. A guard unit moves first, not because they are better, but because someone has to break ice with boots so the rest can follow in the footprints. The bridge is narrower than you imagined. That's either an illusion born of fear or a fact born of timber scarcity. Both feel equally true. Planks flex under weight. Ropes whine. Frost turns the railings to glass. Every third step. Someone slips. Every fourth. Someone catches him. You set your feet as if the river is listening for excuses. Halfway, a flow nuzzles the trestle with crocodile patience and the whole bridge shivers. You and Henri freeze, two statues pretending to be brave. Then you move again because stopping is an introduction to drowning. Henri, voice tight, "If we fall, aim for the shallow philosophy." Define shallow, you say, eyes on your boots. Where the regrets are shorter. You snort a foolish puff of warmth in the air. Halfway over, you see Eblé himself, hat rimmed with cold, eyes bright with arithmetic, helping to lever a beam back into alignment with his bare hands. He barks once, a word you don't catch, and 4 men obey, the kind of syllable that has moved armies since bridges were invented. He does not look like a hero. He looks like a man who has not consented to failure. Later, when you hear he burned his own pontoon train to keep the forges going for nails and braces, you will nod as if you already knew. On the far bank, the snow is pocked with the evidence of waiting, boot holes, ash stains, the outline of a body where someone sat too long. You stumble onto ground, knees suddenly in revolt after the careful ballet across timber. A captain waves you inland, gesturing with a sword dulled by weather. You collapse behind a brush line, pulse banging against your ribs like a fist on a locked door. Then you stand again because there is only forward. Behind you, the second bridge opens, the heavy one, the one for wagons and guns and the parts of an army that make it more than men with muskets. The first caisson rolls out, wheels biting, spokes singing. Somewhere a horse balks and a driver murmurs a prayer so familiar it sounds like a lullaby. The bridge groans a long, theatrical groan, as if auditioning for a tragedy, and then decides to perform a comedy instead. It holds. From the woods across the way, Russian artillery tests the scene with a few slashes of iron. You hear the whistles first, then the fat thuds into the snowbank behind the second trestle. The splashes of powdery ice look almost festive in the morning light. Then the gunners find their range and the jokes stop. A round shot plucks a plank and the bridge shows you what fear looks like in wood. Engineers sprint with replacements, moving like chess pieces you wish you'd learnt the value of sooner. Men cross, men slip, men are caught, men are not. The river eats carefully, without spectacle. As if disdaining applause, an officer on your side shouts to keep the file moving. A sergeant goes hoarse, echoing him. The crowd packs tighter, a wagon wheel shreds a plank, and 3 hands appear at once to brace the axle, with a door torn from a vanished house. Another quirky fact. You see an icon, brown, smoke-kissed, the faint face of a saint, laid over a gap and trodden by 100 boots. The man who placed it crosses himself and then walks on, jaw set. You can't decide if it's blasphemy or the most honest prayer you've ever witnessed. By noon, the far bank is a festival of exhaustion. Men collapse where they step down, then roll to the side without being told. Experience has invented instincts you didn't know human bodies could develop. A surgeon kneels by a man whose hands have turned the colour of plums and works with a speed that was not taught in schools. The wind changes and the smell of wet wood, pitch, and singed wool comes at you like memory. Napoleon appears at one point, small, grey, absolute, riding the line that glows with the heat of intention. He speaks in short sentences, and the sentences become movement. You catch only fragments, but each fragment has the weight. The guard screens. The engineers are gods today. The wagons must not stop. You realise he is not making speeches to history. He is counting seconds. For once, you feel entirely practical about him. A man who can fold time into a bridge is someone worth believing in for another hour. Tell him to smile, Henri mutters, because Henri is constitutionally obligated to keep the world from becoming a statue. If he smiles and you answer, the ice will crack from the shock. Henri considers, then let's settle for a nod. Afternoon turns the air to glass and the river to argument. The Russians probe again, this time with infantry feeling their way along the banks, skirmishers in green ghost through the trees, trading shots with your own light troops, each volley a punctuation mark you never get to the end of. From the left comes the rumour that Chichagov is crossing below, from the right, that Wittgenstein has found a ford above. You don't know which story is true and decide both are, because truth in winter travels in herds. The engineers keep building even as the bridge is used, replacing what breaks, reinforcing what groans, slapping life back into timber with mallets and curses. Ebley's men look like sea creatures now, skins waxy, eyes fierce, breath steaming in productive anger. When one staggers, another shoves him toward a barrel where a fire burns like a narrow idea that refuses to die. You see a pontonniere hold his hands over the flame, then thrust them back into water, then over the flame again, a terrible metronome. You're not sure whether to salute or look away. A gun takes the slope, the horses pull, hooves slipping, nostrils blowing smoke. You and 3 others run to the traces without being asked, throwing your weight into leather and hope. The wheel bumps over a knot of ice and the carriage lunges forward. The driver, tears freezing on his cheeks, thanks you with a word you can't hear because your own blood is loud. The sun lowers until it becomes a suggestion. Shadows lengthen in directions that don't make sense. The river's voice gets bigger, as if the cold squeezes more song from it. And then, because the day insists on having its own idea, something in the middle groans in a tone you will always remember. A section tilts, dips, rights itself, and holds on a prayer you cannot recite because your teeth are clattering too hard. Move! Move! The cry becomes a rope. Men pull themselves along it. A wagon rolls, slips, somehow floats for a panicked heartbeat, then crashes back into alignment with an obedience you swear you'll write a thank you note for if you ever own paper again. On your side, a priest appears again with the blackened brass cross. He doesn't preach. He stands at the bridge, head, and lets men touch the metal as they file past. You press your glove to it and feel nothing through the leather, but something in your chest stops sounding like a mistuned drum for 3 beats. Henri bumps your shoulder. We're going to make it. You nod. We're going to make it across. He hears the difference and doesn't correct you. As night falls, someone whispers the kind of decision that makes a gospel of pragmatism. The bridges must be burned at dawn to keep the Russians from using them when the last units cross. You don't argue. Even grief freezes. Best to do what needs doing while the flame answers your name. The crossing continues under stars as sharp as pins. Torches bloom along the banks. Small suns that organize fear. The spoon keeps time, resolute. A man in a peacock blue coat. Yes, that coat has somehow followed a life of its own. Reappears hauling a sack of salt and a frying pan. Le glacon heureux serves hot, he proclaims in a voice hoarse with vir air. Slapping the pan on a sheet of iron near the fire, he produces from nowhere a strip of horse and a pinch of tea leaves for flavour. 5 men line up with serious faces. You all take a bite. It is, by any reasonable standard, awful. It is also hot. You all applaud because temperature outranks taste in the field manual of the damned. Somewhere in the dark, a cat yowls. You don't see it, but you grin at Henri and he grins back. The white philosopher keeps its own itinerary. Hours pass in a slow braid of motion and lull. When the first grey leaks into the east, you realise you have survived one more ledger page. The last crates pass, the last gun rolls, the last stragglers stumble over planks that have forgotten youth. And then you see what you didn't want to witness. Torches walking out onto the bridge, down into the frames, into the straw tucked as insulation against the river's chew. The flames hesitated yesterday. Today they leap like they're relieved to be useful. The bridge burns the way a letter does when you finally admit you won't answer it. Upright posts glow, collapse, hiss. A section surrenders with a splash that sounds tidy, almost polite. Smoke walks low along the water like a late visitor. The river swallows its gift without thanks. Historians still debate the numbers, the dead, the saved, the wagons rescued, the guns abandoned. They argue whether the crossing was a victory pulled from a grave or a disaster barely survived. Some say Napoleon's choices were genius. Others insist the Russians blinked. You will always remember it as a sentence with too many commas and one essential period. The bridges held long enough. You lie down on the far bank and feel the ground toughen under you like a handshake. Henri drops beside you and exhales a laugh that sounds like a sob that reconsidered. We could open the inn right here, he says. Le glacon heureux, Berezina branch. First course. Soup of noises we don't want to hear again, then you reply. And spoons, he insists, always spoons. The drummer lifts his dented utensil in salute. The gesture earns him a ragged cheer that warms the air for 3 seconds. 3 seconds count. You sleep for 10 minutes. You wake because the river keeps talking and you cannot afford to be the kind of person who ignores rivers. Orders blossom, form up, count if counting still works. Guard the rear, move on. The army is not an army yet. It is a promise walking. But promises have stamina if you let them. You stand, testing joints that forgot flexibility. Your coin, copper with the awl, taps your ear. You remember the man who gave it to you on the ice and whisper a thank you in a language that belongs to effort. The sky is the colour of pewter that someone once polished and then set aside. The wind has new ideas. West, Henri says, not quite a joke. West! You agree, and the word behaves like bread on your tongue. The far bank rises into thin woods where the snow hangs in filigree. When you look back, the river has resumed its old indifference. The smoke smears the air where your road just burned. You cannot see heroism from here. You can only see dark water arranging its reflections. You don't blame it. The world has the right to keep its secrets even when you've paid in frost. As you march, the drummer taps out a rhythm that once meant parade and now means still here. Men fall into step not because step matters to geometry, but because the sound is a spine. You add your feet to the beat. You adjust your pack. You dream a little. With your eyes open, bread that doesn't gossip as it breaks, coffee that tastes of mornings instead of endings, soup with 2 spoons, one for eating, one for keeping time. The woods open for a moment and you see a clearing where sunlight, thin, winter's apology, falls good as gold on a stump. You stop long enough to let it touch your face. Henri does the same. Neither of you speaks. The silence is no longer only Russian. It is yours now, too. And it is finally not an enemy. Behind you, the Berezina finishes erasing your bridges, sending small, satisfied hisses into the cold. Ahead, the road redraws itself, colourless and stubborn. Between the two, you take one careful step and then another. The snow complains. The coin taps your chest. The spoon keeps time. You're crossing something else now, the thin distance between surviving an event and telling its story. You do not say it out loud because words are irrational like anything else, but you know it. The way you know where your hands are in the dark, you hear it before you see it. The low, steady mutter of moving water. A sound so honest it feels like scolding. The snow has been narrating your life for weeks, soft and treacherous, but the Berezina speaks in a different register. It tells you the test is here. It says, without drama, that to go home you must cross something that wants you more than you want yourself. The river lies ahead like a bruise across the land. Wide, dark, rimmed with ice that keeps changing its mind. Patches have frozen hard, other parts are thin, treacherous as a rumour. Wind slides over it with a gambler's confidence. Somewhere downstream, a floe turns, catches on a snag, and shivers apart. You taste damp iron and old wood in the air. The order comes down, halt, dig in, wait for the engineers. Wait, you think, rolling the word around in your mouth. You've been practicing it since Moscow's D scratched on a wall. The horizon answering in silence. But now waiting feels like standing on a doorstep while the staircase burns. Snow falls in powder that doesn't bother to hide its arrogance. The officers move from knot to knot of men, voices clipped, pointing with gloves that have run out of fingers. A sentry gestures to the far bank, where shapes move behind the trees. Russians, many of them, careful, patient. You hear new names tossed into the wind. Chichagov to the south, Wittgenstein to the north, Kutuzov behind like an old wolf with a full understanding of the weather. You are a thread being pulled between many hands. Henri leans close, scarf iced into a sculpture. So, he whispers, do we swim? In this, you gesture at the river that looks like it eats swimmers for breakfast and then asks for the lunch menu. He nods soberly. Right. Right. We'll order takeout. You smile despite the ache that has set up residence in your bones. Humour is a small fire. You hold your hands to it whenever you can. Then the engineers arrive, not the glamorous sort. No plumes, no brass. Just men with tools and stubbornness welded into their spines. Their commander speaks little, but his name passes between the ranks like a match drawn along a fence, Ebler. You will say it for years in a tone you used to reserve for saints and blacksmiths. He and his pontonnier set their chins against the cold and make announcements with axes. The plan, as the plan sees itself, build bridges at Studianka, north of Borisov, where the river narrows, where the ice might cooperate and the banks are low. The plan, as the frost intends it, break hammers, freeze ropes, swallow men, crack planks, mock courage. The engineers accept both versions and get to work anyway. You watch them move down the bank with a seriousness that commands superstition. They carry trestles, beams, stakes, and faces that understand bargaining with water. Some wade in without waiting. The first splash rips a gasp from every throat on shore. They're in up to their knees, then their waists, then their chests. Men turning blue as they hammer posts into a floor they cannot see. One slips, vanishes. He surfaces 10 feet downstream, coughs river, and keeps yawing. Another wraps a length of rope around his torso and grins through teeth that have forgotten about blood flow. Quirky fact for your private museum. A veteran swears by a winter armour trick. Layers of straw under a shirt tucked tight as a secret. He demonstrates by tying handfuls around his torso before stepping into the current. The straw floats him just enough that the others laugh, and then the current decides on a joke of its own and he vanishes under with a yelp. He pops back up sputtering, looking like a haystack that lost an argument, and salutes the shore. Everyone cheers because cheering is one of the few luxuries left. Closer to dawn, the first trestle rises, roar against the sky. Hammers beat a rhythm that almost sounds like hope. The pontonniers work by rote, drive, lash, brace, curse, repeat, learning the river's breath the way a singer learns a partner's tempo. When a flow slams the frame, the whole construction shudders like a surprised horse and then settles again, stubborn. "Saint Boulanger's candle!" someone cries, and the powder trick you learned days ago flares under a clump of soaked twigs. Flames lick out and the bank redraws itself in colours you haven't seen for weeks. Orange, gold, human. The drummer appears as if summoned. Spoon still in service, tapping a beat that holds the line together while the engineers stitch a road out of winter. Historians still debate whether Napoleon deceived Chichagov with feints, whether the move toward Borisov was a clean misdirection or a lucky confusion, whether Erblay's bridges were inevitable or miraculous. There's also an argument about how many men could have made it without the pontonniers burning their own gear to keep the axes flexible. You don't join the debate. You watch a man in water up to his neck pound a steak and decide that argument is a summer sport. Morning opens like a lid, grey and cautious. Word ripples through the ranks. The first bridge is ready for infantry, the second being fastened for wagons and guns. You and Henri shoulder your packs and step forward because that's the script. The crowd presses in, tightening into a mass with one intention: up, across, down. Officers shout order numbers until the numbers themselves sound dehydrated. A guard unit moves first, not because they are better, but because someone has to break ice with boots so the rest can follow in the footprints. The bridge is narrower than you imagined. That's either an illusion born of fear or a fact born of timber scarcity. Both feel equally true. Planks flex under weight. Ropes whine. Frost turns the railings to glass every third step. Someone slips every fourth. Someone catches him. You set your feet as if the river is listening for excuses. Halfway, a flow nuzzles the trestle with crocodile patience and the whole bridge shivers. You and Henri freeze, two statues pretending to be brave. Then you move again because stopping is an introduction to drowning. Henri, voice tight. "If we fall, aim for the shallow philosophy." Define shallow, you say, eyes on your boots. Where the regrets are shorter. You snort a foolish puff of warmth in the air. Halfway over, you see Eblay himself, hat rimmed with cold, eyes bright with arithmetic, helping to lever a beam back into alignment with his bare hands. He barks once, a word you don't catch, and 4 men obey the kind of syllable that has moved armies since bridges were invented. He does not look like a hero. He looks like a man who has not consented to failure. Later, when you hear he burnt his own pontoon train to keep the forges going for nails and braces, you will nod as if you already knew. On the far bank, the snow is pocked with the evidence of waiting, boot holes, ash stains, the outline of a body where someone sat too long. You stumble onto ground, knees suddenly in revolt after the careful ballet across timber. A captain waves you inland, gesturing with a sword dulled by weather. You collapse behind a brush line, pulse banging against your ribs like a fist on a locked door. Then you stand again because there is only forward. Behind you, the second bridge opens, the heavy one, the one for wagons and guns and the parts of an army that make it more than men with muskets. The first caisson rolls out, wheels biting, spokes singing, somewhere a horse balks and a driver murmurs a prayer so familiar it sounds like a lullaby. The bridge groans a long, theatrical groan, as if auditioning for a tragedy, and then decides to perform a comedy instead. It holds. From the woods across the way, Russian artillery tests the scene with a few slashes of iron. You hear the whistles first, then the fat thuds into the snowbank behind the second trestle. The splashes of powdery ice look almost festive in the morning light. Then the gunners find their range and the jokes stop. A round shot plucks a plank and the bridge shows you what fear looks like in wood. Engineers sprint with replacements. Moving like chess pieces you wish you'd learnt the value of sooner. Men cross, men slip, men are caught, men are not. The river eats carefully, without spectacle, as if disdaining applause. An officer on your side shouts to keep the file moving. A sergeant goes hoarse, echoing him. The crowd packs tighter. A wagon wheel shreds a plank. and 3 hands appear at once to brace the axle, with a door torn from a vanished house. Another quirky fact: you see an icon, brown, smoke-kissed, the faint face of a saint laid over a gap and trodden by 100 boots. The man who placed it crosses himself and then walks on, jaw set. You can't decide if it's blasphemy or the most honest prayer you've ever witnessed. By noon, the far bank is a festival of exhaustion. Men collapse where they step down, then roll to the side without being told. Experience has invented instincts you didn't know human bodies could develop. A surgeon kneels by a man whose hands have turned the colour of plums and works with a speed that was not taught in schools. The wind changes and the smell of wet wood, pitch, and singed wool comes at you like memory. Napoleon appears at one point, small or grey, absolute, riding the line that glows with the heat of intention. He speaks in short sentences, and the sentences become movement. You catch only fragments, but each fragment has the weight. The guard screams, "The engineers are gods today. The wagons must not stop." You realise he is not making speeches to history, he is counting seconds. For once, you feel entirely practical about him. A man who can fold time into a bridge is someone worth believing in for another hour. "Tell him to smile," Henri mutters, because Henri is constitutionally obligated to keep the world from becoming a statue. "If he smiles," do you answer, "the ice will crack from the shock." Henri considers, "Then let's settle for a nod." Afternoon turns the air to glass and the river to argument. The Russians probe again, this time with infantry feeling their way along the banks. Skirmishers in green ghost through the trees, trading shots with your own light troops, each volley a punctuation mark you never get to the end of. From the left comes the rumour that Chichagov is crossing below, from the right that Wittgenstein has found a ford above. You don't know which story is true and decide both are, because truth in winter travels in herds. The engineers keep building even as the bridge is used, replacing what breaks, reinforcing what groans, slapping life back into timber with mallets and curses. Eblé's men look like sea creatures now, skins waxy, eyes fierce, breath steaming in productive anger. When one staggers, another shoves him toward a barrel, where a fire burns like a narrow idea that refuses to die. You see a pontonnier hold his hands over the flame, then thrust them back into water, then over the flame again. A terrible metronome. You're not sure whether to salute or look away. A gun takes the slope, the horses pull, hooves slipping, nostrils blowing smoke. You and 3 others run to the traces without being asked. Throwing your weight into leather and hope, the wheel bumps over a knot of ice and the carriage lunges forward. The driver, tears freezing on his cheeks, thanks you with a word you can't hear because your own blood is loud. The sun lowers until it becomes a suggestion. Shadows lengthen in directions that don't make sense. The river's voice gets bigger, as if the cold squeezes more song from it, and then, because the day insists on having its own idea, something in the middle groans in a tone you will always remember. A section tilts, dips, rights itself, and holds on a prayer you cannot recite because your teeth are clattering too hard. "Move! Move!" The cry becomes a rope. Men pull themselves along it. A wagon rolls, slips, somehow floats for a panicked heartbeat, then crashes back into alignment with an obedience you swear you'll write a thank you note for if you ever own paper again. On your side, a priest appears again with the blackened brass cross. He doesn't preach. He stands at the bridgehead and lets men touch the metal as they file past. You press your glove to it and feel nothing through the leather, but something in your chest stops sounding like a mistuned drum for 3 beats. Henri bumps your shoulder. "We're going to make it." You nod. "We're going to make it across." He hears the difference and doesn't correct you. As night falls, someone whispers the kind of decision that makes a gospel of pragmatism. The bridges must be burned at dawn to keep the Russians from using them when the last units cross. You don't argue. Even grief freezes. Best to do what needs doing while the flame answers your name. The crossing continues under stars as sharp as pins. Torches bloom along the banks, small suns that organise fear. The spoon keeps time, resolute. A man in a peacock blue coat, yes, that coat has somehow followed a life of its own, reappears hauling a sack of salt and a frying pan. "Le glacon heureux serves hot," he proclaims in a voice hoarse with river air, slapping the pan on a sheet of iron near the fire. He produces from nowhere a strip of horse and a pinch of tea leaves for flavour. 5 men line up with serious faces. You all take a bite. It is, by any reasonable standard, Awful. It is also hot. You all applaud because temperature outranks taste in the field manual of the damned. Somewhere in the dark, a cat yowls. You don't see it, but you grin at Henri and he grins back. The white philosopher keeps its own itinerary. Hours pass in a slow braid of motion and lull. When the first grey leaks into the east, you realise you have survived one more ledger page. The last crates pass, the last gun rolls, the last stragglers stumble over planks that have forgotten youth. And then you see what you didn't want to witness. Torches walking out onto the bridge, down into the frames, into the straw tucked as insulation against the river's chew. The flames hesitated yesterday. Today they leap like they're relieved to be useful. The bridge burns the way a letter does when you finally admit you won't answer it. Upright posts glow. Collapse. Hiss. A section surrenders with a splash that sounds tidy, almost polite. Smoke walks low along the water like a late visitor. The river swallows its gift without thanks. Historians still debate the numbers, the dead, the saved, the wagons rescued, the guns abandoned. They argue whether the crossing was a victory pulled from a grave or a disaster barely survived. Some say Napoleon's choices were genius. Others insist the Russians blinked. You will always remember it as a sentence with too many commas and one essential period. The bridges held long enough. You lie down on the far bank and feel the ground toughen under you like a handshake. Henri drops beside you and exhales a laugh that sounds like a sob that reconsidered. "We could open the inn right here," he says. Le Glacon Heureux, Berezina branch. "First course, soup of noises we don't want to hear again," you reply. "And spoons," he insists. Always spoons. The drummer lifts his dented utensil in salute. The gesture earns him a ragged cheer that warms the air for 3 seconds. 3 seconds count. You sleep for 10 minutes. You wake because the river keeps talking and you cannot afford to be the kind of person who ignores rivers. Orders blossom, form up. Count if counting still works. Guard the rear. Move on. The army is not an army yet. It is a promise walking. But promises have stamina if you let them. You stand, testing joints that forgot flexibility. Your coin, copper with the hole, taps your ribs. You remember the man who gave it to you on the ice and whisper a thank you in a language that belongs to effort. The sky is the colour of pewter that someone once polished and then set aside. The wind has new ideas. "West," Henri says, not quite to the Joe. "West." You agree, and the word behaves like bread on your tongue. The far bank rises into thin woods where the snow hangs in filigree. When you look back, the river has resumed its old indifference. The smoke smears the air where your road just burned. You cannot see heroism from here. You can only see dark water arranging its reflections. You don't blame it. The world has the right to keep its secrets even when you've paid in frost. As you march, the drummer taps out a rhythm that once meant parade and now means still here. Men fall into step not because step matters to geometry, but because the sound is a spine. You add your feet to the beat. You adjust your pack. You dream a little. With your eyes open, bread that doesn't gossip as it breaks. Coffee that tastes of mornings instead of endings. Soup with 2 spoons, one for eating, one for keeping time. The woods open for a moment and you see a clearing where sunlight, thin, winter's apology, falls good as gold on a stump. You stop long enough to let it touch your face. Henri does the same. Neither of you speaks. The silence is no longer only Russian. It is yours now, too. And it is finally not an enemy. Behind you, the Berezina finishes erasing your bridges, sending small, satisfied hisses into the cold. Ahead, the road redraws itself, colourless and stubborn. Between the two, you take one careful step and then another. The snow complains. The coin taps your chest. The spoon keeps time. You are crossing something else now, the thin distance between surviving an event and telling its story. You do not say it out loud, because words are irrational like anything else. But you know it, the way you know where your hands are in the dark. You walk. The river is behind you, but it feels like it crossed you instead. The Berezina didn't just take men. It took sound, colour, weight. You march west through silence that has opinions. Every step seems to ask, was that worth it? You don't answer because your jaw's too cold to form philosophy, and because the only true answer would freeze solid before it left your lips. The land beyond the river looks the same as what came before. Flat, white, endless, but it feels different. Survival has changed the air. It's heavier somehow, as if even the wind knows what you've done to deserve it. The army is smaller now. Army might be generous. What's left is an idea in motion, an echo of discipline keeping time with the spoon's eternal rhythm. Men don't march anymore. They sway. They drift, carried by habit and hunger, bound together by frostbite and shared disbelief. You used to walk beside flags, now you walk beside ghosts. Henri still manages to smile sometimes. "I think we're losing weight," he says one morning, kicking at a snowdrift. "Congratulations," you mutter. "The new imperial diet." "Results guaranteed," he answers. "Or your empire back." You both laugh, though it sounds like coughing. Historians still debate what held the remnants of the Grand Armée together after the Berezina. Some say discipline, others say fear. A few romantic souls call it courage, but you think it's inertia, the simple physics of men too tired to stop falling forward. You trudge through the woods, branches cracking like brittle bones. The cold has lost its drama. It no longer burns or bites. It just is. You've entered the part of winter that doesn't need to prove itself. The snowflakes are so small they feel personal, deliberate, as if each one came here with your name written on it. Around midday, you reach a village, or what's left of one. Half the houses are roofless, the rest stuffed with straw and corpses, arranged like cautionary tales. There's no food, no firewood, no hope, but there's shelter, and that's enough. You collapse into what used to be someone's kitchen, a broken pot, a bench, and a wall that almost keeps the wind out. Luxury accommodations at Le Glacon Heureux, Western Branch. Henri enters behind you, drops his pack, and sighs. "I'd give anything for bread." "Even the Emperor's hat?" you ask. He considers. "I'd trade it for a biscuit." "Blasphemy," you whisper, smiling. "Napoleon's hat is sacred. So is yeast." You both chuckle. It's absurd how funny hunger can be when it's old enough to vote. Later, as night settles in, you share the last of your brandy, a swallow each. It's enough to make your tongues believe in warmth again. The fire you coax from shredded wallpaper burns green from the ink. You don't care. Henri stares into the flame. Do you think he regrets it? "The Emperor?" He nods. "Moscow. All of it." You shrug, watching the smoke writhe. "Maybe, but regret's a rich man's coat. We can't afford it." He laughs softly. "True, we've got frostbite. He's got philosophy." The wind shifts outside, whispering through the cracks. You pull your coat tighter and close your eyes, hoping for dreams that don't include snow. Morning comes with new arithmetic. Of every 10 men who lay down, 7 rise. No one asks about the other 3. The column reforms without ceremony, just movement, slow and stubborn. The road west runs between forests, white on white, sky and ground merging until the horizon is an accusation. You keep your head down. Thinking requires calories you don't have. Once, you find a loaf of frozen bread inside an abandoned wagon. It's as hard as iron, older than memory, but when you knock it on the wood, it makes a sound that feels like hope. You and Henri take turns hammering it with the butt of your muskets until it cracks open. Inside, crumbs and frost. You eat both. "Delicious," Henri says solemnly. "Need salt," you reply. The laughter that follows feels real. Historians still debate where the turning point truly was, Borodino, Moscow, the Berezina, but you think it's here, now, in this anonymous stretch of road where laughter becomes a strategy. By evening, the sky bruises purple and the air goes still. You spot a handful of peasants watching from the edge of a forest. They don't move, don't speak, don't help, but you can't blame them, you wouldn't help either. A child steps forward, barely visible in the gloom, and tosses something toward you. You flinch, then realise it's a turnip, a frozen one, but food nonetheless. Henri picks it up and bows extravagantly. The child vanishes back into the trees. You stand there a moment, unsure whether to laugh or cry. You choose neither. You keep walking. That night, the moon rises thin as a blade. You and Henri make camp under an overturned sled. You light a tiny candle and watch the wax fight gravity. Henri says, "If we survive this, I'm never complaining about Paris rain again." "You will," you reply. He grins. "Of course, but I'll feel bad about it." You both fall asleep laughing quietly, you see. A few days later, you see the first French village signs, names you can pronounce again. The sound of them hits you like a kiss. The men around you begin to talk more, almost afraid to believe it's real. You pass a stream that hasn't frozen, thin as a cracking glass. You kneel, cup your hands, and drink. The water tastes like time rewound. It tastes like April. Henri kneels beside you. "Paris soon," he whispers. You nod, though you know soon is still far, but it's a beautiful lie. and lies have carried you this far. As you rise, you spot something ahead, a small black shape half buried in snow. You brush the drift away and find a drumming, its skin torn and its handle still tied with a strip of ribbon. You lift it carefully. The spoon's gone, but the dent marks remain. Henri smiles sadly. He kept time until the end. You nod, running your thumb over the cold metal rim. Maybe he still is. You strap it to your pack. Someone has to carry the rhythm forward. At sunset, you make camp near the ruins of a barn, sir. The last of the army, what's left of it, gathers around small fires that hiss in protest. Men hum songs without words, some pray, some sleep sitting up. Napoleon rides past once, a silhouette in grey against the pale firelight. He doesn't speak, but his presence moves through the camp like a ghost remembering command. You watch him disappear into the dark and wonder what he hears now, guns or silence. Henri leans toward you. He looks smaller. You shake your head. We're just farther away. The wind shifts, bringing the smell of thaw, not warmth yet, but a promise of it. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The frost has become part of you now, living in your joints or your breath, your dreams. When you finally drift towards sleep, the last thing you hear is the snow whispering its question again. Still here? And this time, you whisper back, yes. The Emperor rides alone now, or it feels that way, and even when there are hundreds around him, he's a shape inside a storm, smaller than you imagined, but somehow heavier than anything else on the horizon. You see him once at dawn, a grey coat swallowed by frost, his horse's breath rising like incense. The men still straighten when he passes, though it's no longer reverence, it's muscle memory, a habit stronger than faith. You watch him dismount by a ruined windmill. The air trembles with quiet, even the crows are gone. He speaks briefly with an aide, gestures toward the west, then turns his face toward the empty sky. You can't hear the words, but you can guess their taste, orders, calculations, or maybe just silence pretending to be strategy. Historians still debate what Napoleon was thinking in those final weeks of retreat. Was it pride, exhaustion, disbelief? Some say he was already planning the next campaign. Others say he was staring at the edge of himself, realizing that no map could show the way home. You only know what it looked like. A man watching his shadow retreat faster than his army. The frost isn't as cruel now, it's subtler, almost intimate. It doesn't bite, it lingers, touches. The snow no longer blinds, it reflects what's left of you. The world has gone monochrome, as if God ran out of paint halfway through winter. You and Henri march without talking. Words have become luxury items again, traded sparingly. Sometimes you catch each other's eyes and grin for no reason, just to remind yourselves that humour exists, even if Paris doesn't yet. The days are shorter still. The sun rises tired and goes to bed early, leaving the sky the colour of wet tin. The road winds through forests stripped bare, the trees' black ribs poking through drifts. You've seen this pattern for so long it started to look like language. Lines of trunks spelling out a message too slow for human comprehension. You cross villages that look abandoned by both armies and gods. A door swings in the wind like it's waving goodbye. Once, you find a single cow alive, half-starved but breathing steam. Henri bows deeply to it and says, "Madame, we salute your patriotism." You both laugh until you cough. Then you take turns milking it, reverently, like priests at a holy relic. The warm milk is heaven. You don't even heat it. You drink it straight from the tin, and for 3 whole minutes, the world makes sense again. "Do you think she'll remember us?" Henri asks, patting the cow's side. "Probably tell her friends she met 2 idiots," you say. "Historians would debate the details," he replies, dead serious. You grin, shaking your head. "They'll call it the cow at Smorgany, a pivotal encounter." He salutes, long may she chew. You hear rumours in the march. The Emperor will leave soon, heading ahead of the arm. Some say it's to raise new troops. Some say to protect France from panic. Some whisper it's escape dressed as duty. You don't believe any of it at first. He's been the centre of this frozen world too long to vanish. But the whispers keep growing, carried from mouth to mouth like embers that refuse to die. That night, you huddle near a small fire built from wagon debris. The wood spits and protests. Henri pokes at it with a bayonet. "If he goes," he says, "will we even know?" You shrug. "We'll feel it." Like a candle going out? You nod. Or like the air suddenly remembering it can move again. He's quiet for a long time after that. The frost sharpens by morning. It always does when rumours turn out true. You don't see him leave, but you feel it. There's no drum roll, no speech, just a hollow space where authority used to hum. The officers move differently now, less like satellites, more like survivors. The army doesn't stop, it simply bends around the absence and keeps going. Napoleon is gone. The emperor is now a man on a sleigh somewhere ahead. Racing through Poland, chased by history and escorted by disbelief, the men know, even if they don't say it. They march harder for a few hours, as if trying to catch up with him. Then, when it becomes clear they won't, they march slower. Henri breaks the silence. Well, that's that. You nod. He'll be in Paris before we even mud smell it. Maybe he'll warm it up for us, Henri says, smiling faintly. You almost laugh, but your throat closes. Yeah, you say. Maybe. The wind kicks up again, scattering snow like dust from a broken monument. You glance back over your shoulder, expecting to see a figure on the horizon, one last silhouette in a greatcoat. There's nothing, just the long white road unwinding like a sigh. The days that follow are slower, softer. The worst is behind you, not because it's easier now, but because your body has stopped keeping track. Hunger has learned to whisper. Pain has learned manners. Even death feels like background noise. The men talk more now, maybe because silence no longer belongs to him. They tell stories about home, bread that crackled, women who laughed, rivers that ran liquid. Someone describes the smell of coffee so vividly you swear you can taste it. Henri starts humming again, the old marching tune warped into a lullaby. You hum along. It's completely off-key. It's perfect. You pass through a forest at dusk where the trees sparkle, tiny crystals of frost catching what little light remains. It's absurdly beautiful, almost cruel. You stop walking for a moment just to stare. For all the death, the mud, the madness, this part of Russia at least remembers how to shimmer. Henri notices your pause. You okay? Yeah, you whisper. Just wanted to see what survival looks like. He nods. Sparkly, you both laugh, softly. That night, in a hut that barely stands, you find a mirror on the wall, cracked, smoky, warped. You haven't seen your reflection in months. You step closer, lift the candle, and stare. The face that stares back isn't yours. It's thinner, older, eyes sunk deep, beard stiff with ice. The uniform looks like it belongs to someone more ambitious. You don't feel horror, just recognition. The frost carved this version of you one night while you weren't paying attention. Henri steps beside you and peers into the mirror. Handsome, he says immediately. Positively romantic. The ladies of Paris will faint. You grin weakly. Only from the smell. He laughs so hard the mirror rattles. The sound feels like a benediction. The next morning, you wake to thaw, real thaw. Not spring, but the first whisper of it. The air has texture again. Damp, heavy, full of promise and rot. The snow begins to slump, tired of its own perfection. The road is a ribbon of mud and ice, and for the first time in weeks, you can hear water moving under the crust. Henri squints toward the sunrise. You hear that? What? The world breathing. He's right. The silence isn't dead anymore. It's sleeping, preparing to wake. You don't talk much after that. You just walk. Every step feels like the punctuation at the end of a sentence that's taken too long to write. When you cross into Lithuania, there's no sign, no trumpet, no fanfare, and just a line of trees that looks slightly less Russian. You step past them, and Henri raises his hand in salute. To Moscow, he says. To frost, you reply. To regret, he adds, mumbling. You grin, and to surviving all three. The two of you keep walking until the horizon forgets to be cruel. You step into a morning that feels like paper, thin, crinkled, ready to tear if you breathe too hard. The snow is old now, tired of dramatics, greying it to the edges where it has rubbed too long against boots and blood and sky. You move because moving is your last conviction, west. Always that small, useful word, west, until the wind loses interest and the maps switch alphabets. The road opens into fields that remember summer as a rumour. Birch trunks stand like quills waiting for ink. You carry no grand thoughts, you carry a pack, a musket you mostly use as a walking stick, a copper coin sewn over your heart that taps like a metronome. Henri limps beside you, his breath a series of commas. Behind you, the river that tried to end your story has gone back to being geography. Ahead, the border you once crossed like a boast waits like a question you must answer again. You do not talk much. Words are rations. The men around you, what remains of an empire's argument, wear blankets of silence. Flags droop, drums are mostly memories, and uniforms are a collage. Russian felt boots, ladies' fur muffs are liberated from palaces, French shakos patched with Polish scarves. Quirky fact for the day, you pass a fellow wearing a curtain tassel as a shoulder knot, gold threads sparkling absurdly whenever the sun confesses it still exists. He calls himself Marshal of Drapery and bows with ridiculous solemnity at every milestone. You all grin because the performance spends no calories and returns a little heat. By noon, the wind softens. You smell something rare. Damp earth under the crust. The snow sinks a little with every step, sighing as if it too is finished with heroics. A wagon creaks past with one wheel rimmed in rope, a carpenter's hack that holds just well enough to qualify as hope. Men walk with hands tucked in armpits, elbows pinned tight, a nation of penguins migrating toward rumour. Each hour offers a tiny trade, a degree less of cruelty for a degree more of exhaustion. You take the bargain in instalments. There's a village that might be called Kovno, or might be called Mercy. It is not burned entirely. Some rooms still remember corners. A woman stands in a doorway with a pot of something steaming and ladles out silence that tastes like soup. You and Henri stand in the line like parishioners. The bowl you take is chipped, its handle gone, and the liquid inside is half water, half cabbage, half miracle. You sip. The warmth walks into your chest and sits down. Le Glacon Heureux is going to be jealous, Henri whispers. We will sue, you say, solemn, for theft of recipe, bouillon de surviving. He snorts softly and licks the rim. You both close your eyes for one heartbeat longer than necessary. Late afternoon. An officer with a beard stiff as glass rides by, announcing news in a voice that sounds like paper tearing. The Emperor has gone ahead to Paris, left from Smorgony, sleigh flying, the world opening for him like a wound, and then closing again. Historians still debate whether leaving then was prudence, necessity, or a crack in the mirror he finally allowed himself to see. On the road, the news feels neutral and heavy. Like an iron pot, you can carry it or set it down, and either way you will still be walking. You do not curse him, you do not cheer him, you register the fact and then check your feet, because feet are facts too. A little later a rumour passes the other way. Prussian troops somewhere up the line have signed something with the Russians. A convention. Neutrality. A shrug that sounds like a border changing its mind, Tauroggen. Someone thinks, you do not know the spelling, you know the feeling, the map moving under you like ice. Dusk arrives as if the day has been erased with a damp cloth. The sky goes bluish, the colour of unripe plums, and the first star appears with the exhaustion of a watchman who's seen enough. You and Henri shelter in a shed that still knows how to stand. There's a door torn from its hinges. You prop it on 2 barrels and call it a roof. You light the candle, the same one that has learned to be a patient teacher, and set your travel clock beside it. The clock remains honourably silent. It has never lied to you. It doesn't start tonight. What will we say when we get home? Henri asks softly. Nothing, you answer. We'll eat, and after. We'll sleep. He nods, and then? You stare at the candle. Then we'll learn the names of the quiet. He smiles at that, tiredly, gratefully. In the morning, the wind wears a different accent. The birches lean the other way. The horizon, which has been heavy for weeks, seems to lift, as if someone tugged a string behind it. The snow is pitted by raindrops that failed their audition and gave up. Your boots find mud under the sugar. It's ugly and perfect. Men begin to count again, not losses, steps, 20 to the next hedge, 30 to the hill, 10 to the fire. Arithmetic returns as a cousin of hope. Someone behind you whistles a bar of music and botches it. Someone else fixes it with a laugh. You test your knees, your wrists, your name. They're all imperfect and available. Midday brings a practical miracle. You find a stack of planks, untouched, behind a smithy that smells of rust and patience. You and 2 others fashion a sled, lash the runners with leather strips cut from a belt that has no job anymore, and pull a man whose feet have retired from service. He cries once, loudly, and then tells a joke about being promoted to Field Marshal of Sitting Down. The title sticks. You salute when you pass him later, and he returns it with a spoon he produces from nowhere. The dented relic glinting like a medal. The rhythm resumes. Even the wind steps a little in time. The road kinks, crosses a low rise, And then, there it is, the line you felt but could not name, the border, not a triumphal arch, not even a sign, just a change in the way fences sit and how roofs tilt. The subtle grammar of elsewhere. You walk through it like air and only realise afterward that your shoulders have lowered an inch. You look back and see nothing except whiteness and a few stubborn crows riding the wind like commas. You look ahead and see roofs that remember ovens. You enter Wilno, by a street that once held parties and now holds the last argument of the Grande Armée. The city is crowded with the future of the retreat, wounded packed into halls, officers counting scraps of supply, wagons shaking themselves back into repair. It smells of straw and sweat and soup pretending to be soup. You think the place will swallow you, and for a day it almost does. The crush, the fevers, the doors that slam shut when there are no more blankets. Men die standing because there are no spaces to lie down. You and Henri press through like raindrops through wool, past a church whose bells ring, honest and appalled. Historical event, properly witnessed. General Murat, plumes dimmed, eyes still theatrical, tries to arrange what remains into something that can still call itself an army, while Bavarian, Saxon, Polish fragments cling together like brittle sugar. Staff officers post orders on doors. Couriers strip their horses to save the animals' heat. Surgeons work to the metronome of their own exhaustion. Somewhere, an officer says the magazines were promised and then shrugs at the emptiness of a warehouse. The arithmetic of misery goes on the wall like a weather report. Rations per head, horses per gun, distances between fires. You perform your part in the liturgy, warming hands over a brazier, trading a button for a crust, finding a needle and thread and rescuing a seam that might keep the wind out of your shoulder. By midnight, you're already moving again. The city cannot hold the weight of your survival. It tips you out through another gate with polite ruthlessness. The road beyond is brown in places, white where the night insists, and black where many feet have told it a story. You drag your pack, your spoon beat, your coin, your name. Henri stumbles once, twice, and you catch him by the collar, the way men caught one another on the Berezina, and you do not let go until the muscle in his jaw stops quivering. "I'm here," he says, embarrassed. "I know," you answer. "I'm counting you. High mathematics," he mutters, but he squeezes your wrist before he pulls free. You pass a frozen orchard where, improbably, a few apples have mummified on the trees, brown, shrunken, sweet as apologies. Men climb, hands clumsy, and pluck them with ceremony. You and Henri share one, alternating bites, laughing at the faces you both make. Sugar touches your tongue and shivers the memory of Paris awake. For a minute you are two apprentices walking home late, talking about nothing, while the Seine pretends to be still. A road sign appears with letters balanced back on Latin feet. The syllables taste like something you once knew. You read it aloud, just to hear your mouth pronounce spring again. You don't cry. That's all right. The wind will do that for you. Night brings a proper roof with a floor that does not try to remember snow. The owner, priest, merchant, saint in disguise, sets a pot on the stove and insists you eat. The stew has meat in it. Actual meat. Not a rumour with broth. Henri stares into the bowl as if it knows prophecies. You both use 2 spoons, because you can and because a promise is a form of religion. One for eating, one for tapping. The spoon ticks, the stew fogs your faces, the room grows their own past back by half an inch. "Tomorrow," Henri says when you lie down on straw that smells of animals and forgiveness, "we should buy oranges. In a land without oranges?" "We'll find them," he says, turning so the candlelight finds his tired grin. Historians still debate whether oranges were ever real, but my tongue remembers. You close your eyes, smiling because muscles remember how. Morning is not warm, but it's not sentencing you anymore. The frost has stepped back to observe. The silence has softened into a chamber where sound can live. The road collects you gently, and the borders ahead become not lines to defy, but distances to accommodate. You're thin, you're older than the calendar permits. You're alive, outrageously. Back at the Niemen, the same river you kissed with your boots in summer, you do not stay at an entrance. You stage a leaving. The army that returns is a whisper with a backbone. No drums, no flags, just the sound of ice admitting its error under careful feet. You don't look for ceremonies. The river offers you one anyway. A slab of sun across the surface like a benediction no priest would dare give. You take it without words. Someone behind you starts a song, just a thread, And it is not martial, it is not brave, or it is not loud. It is true, you join, Henri joins. Others join in the way tired men join anything that resembles a road home. The notes walk beside you like an animal that has finally forgiven your noise. When you step onto the far bank, the coin taps your heart as if taking attendance. You answer, aloud. Present, a white cat slips from behind a post and crosses the path, tail up, giving you the look cats give kings and beggars alike. Equality in indifference. Madame, you say, and bow. Henri laughs and bows too. The cat does not blink. She has outlived empires. She will outlive this conversation. You love her for it. After, there will be exact numbers and inexact excuses. There will be proclamations and newspapers and uniforms on hooks. There will be Paris rain. There will be stairs you climb that do not lead to snow. There will be bread that breaks like the heart wants to. There will be a small inn with a ridiculous name, and 2 spoons on every table, one for eating, one for memory. There will be a travel clock that continues to refuse to tick, and a peacock blue coat hung in the corner like an inside joke the room enjoys in silence. There will be arguments about genius and madness, about the point where winter became history and history became bedtime. Historians still debate whether frost, silence, or regret did the real work. You suspect they travel as a pack, like wolves that learn to share, but that is all later. For now, you walk into a morning that is not kind and not cruel, merely possible. The road says your name the way a friend does when it's time to go. The spoon keeps time, the coin keeps faith. And you, thin, older, outrageously alive, keep walking west until possibility becomes a door you can open. The candles burn lower. Your breath slows. The story has crossed its own river and wandered back to the bed it left warm hours ago. The soldiers settle into a softer grammar. The tents and ruined churches dissolve into rooms you know, curtains stirring, glass humming with wind, a cup on a table that remembers being held. You lie there, not in Russia anymore, but in the simple geography where a pillow can be trusted. And the frost on the window is only decoration, not law. Footsteps fade into the hall. The spoon taps once, twice, and then becomes a fingertip on your wrist, finding the pulse that never stops. Think of bread breaking, very gently, and the steam that rises in no hurry. Think of the river after the bridges, when it takes back its reflections and nods as if to say, go on, have other work to do. Think of the white cat, yawning, choosing the warmest square of sunlight, the republic without borders where creatures nap. The uniforms are folded now, the coin stays over the heart because it likes the address. Out beyond the window, the snow remembers a tune, but it hums it softly, to itself, if at all. You can forgive the map for being so large. You can forgive the road for making you finish it. You can even forgive the silence, because it carried your footsteps without letting them fall apart. Somewhere a clock refuses to tick, and that too is kindness. Time at last, agreeing to blur. The last image is simple. A lamp turned low. A door half open to the warm corridor. 2 spoons on a saucer catching the last of the light. That's enough. Let the world put its finger to its lips. Let the air go patient. Let the bed become a small boat that already knows the way downstream. Good night.